A very warm welcome to Juliet Brown, who's our new Chief Commissioner. Delighted to have you with us, Juliet. What we'll do, if it's okay, is we'll go around the virtual room and then the physical room to do some introductions, and then if there's anything you wish to say just in terms of introduction. Let's start with Suzanne.
Apologies, coming off mute. Yeah, good morning, Juliet. Lovely to meet you.
And Emma.
Morning, Emma Wood, Chief Executive for Welsh Ambulance.
Angela.
Good morning, Angela Mutlow, Corporate Director Operations at Lice.
Ross.
Good morning, Ross Wyatt, Director of Commissioning for Ambulance Services and National Programmes.
Susan.
Good morning, Juliet. Croeso, welcome. Susan Elsmore, lay member.
Lee Davis.
Morning, Juliet. I'm Lee Davis. I'm the Director of Strategy and Planning in Hywel Dda, and I'm standing in for Phil Clear today.
Rob.
Morning, Rob Holcomb here for Nicola today.
Carol.
Bore da, Carol Bell, Director of Nursing for the JCC.
Gwen.
Gwen Kohler, Deputy Director of Finance and Value. I'm standing in for Stacey today.
Thank you. Paul.
Good morning, Paul Worthington. I'm lay member for JCC. Nice to have you on board.
Nia.
And good morning. I'm Nia Roberts. I'm also a lay member. Also nice to have you on board.
Shamim.
Hi, Juliet. I'm Shamim Nawaz. I'm also a lay member, and welcome to the team.
Carol.
Morning, Juliet. Carol Shlevere, Chief Executive, Betsy Carolida. So good to see you again. Thanks.
Hayley.
Good morning, Hayley Thomas, Chief Executive, Palace Teaching Health Board.
Abby.
Good morning, Abby Harris, the Chief Second Swansea Bay University Health Board. Nice to see you, Juliet.
And then briefly in the room, Sue.
Good morning, Borda. Sue O'Leary, Director of Commissioning for Mental Health, Learning Disabilities and Vulnerable Groups.
George.
Hello again, George Galletley, Director of Corporate Planning and Strategy for JCC.
Mel.
Mel Wilkie, Director of Commissioning for Specialised Services.
Aaron.
Fowler, Committee Secretary.
Me, Hugh. Hi, Juliet. Nice to see you again. Thank you. Hello.
Welcome, your Medical Director.
Juliet, over to you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, I'm delighted to be here. I think I've met most of you through my interview process, so thank you for putting me through my paces at that time. Although that seems quite a while ago now, it's been a long time coming, so it's great to be here today and a very useful thing to have on my first morning. For those who didn't meet me through the interview process, I join you where I've been from Northwest London ICB, where I worked for 12 years. And I did a whole variety of different roles there, which I won't go into, but our approach we took to commissioning there was very much a one of working with commissioners and providers and that collaborative approach to transformation to how do we improve population health outcomes. So it's really great to see that we've got that similar approach here and to have the commitment and energy of everybody in this room to make sure that we are commissioning the best services we can for Wales. I did also started my career in Wales and trained indeed with one of the group already with Nicola at the same time. I'm not going to pretend to have the understanding that all of you have about the Welsh health system at the moment and the issues that we're facing. So I'm very clear that I've got a few things, probably three things over the next few months. One is to get that understanding, and if I've not got time in your diaries yet, I will do soon, and are really keen to understand all the issues we're discussing from your perspective. I recognise as well that we've got a big agenda this year, so to make sure that we have got that grip and understanding that we need to take things forward. And I think the other thing for me is about building those relationships to make sure that this is that we can do effective commissioning going forward. So I think those are my probably 3 priorities over the next few months. And this meeting is a great way to start that. So I really look forward, Chair, to hearing our discussion and helping me to start hearing things from your perspective and understanding the issues that we are dealing with. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Juliet, and we're very much looking forward to working with you over the months ahead. And you're accountable officer as of now, I think, so do please
to run away.
Great. So are there any apologies for absence?
The people who touched on the screen. So Paul Mears has given his apologies. Nicola Progogis for Rob's here for Nicola. Phil Clues, apologies for Lee's here. Amanda Riani, lay member, has given her apologies as well.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest anyone wishes to make? Items on the agenda today that have not already been made? No, thank you. Got 2 sets of minutes. First of all, the 17th of March. First of all, can we consider these in relation to accuracy first of all? Any issues? No, we agree those are a correct record then. And on the 23rd of March, again, any issues in terms of accuracy? No, therefore they're agreed as a correct record as well. There are 3 items on the action log. 2 are not yet due. That's in relation to performance reporting in July and the recommendation for in terms of rural response options in November. And then there's Chair's action in relation to the annual plan, which has been proposed for closure. We're happy with that? Yes. Any other actions that have been missed? Okay, then we'll move on then to the setting the scene section of the report. And first of all, my report. I'll take the bulk of this as read. There is an item just goes on from the action we've just considered to ratify, and that was my decision in relation to action on financial limits, again, which we'll come on to in a moment. Secondly, I think it's worth the committee noting the objectives have been set for me by the previous cabinet secretary as part of my appraisal. I think that also then needs to feed into business of the committee as well. A lot of those are already very clear within our plan for the year, particularly around service reviews, but it's important that I think the committee has cited my objectives. I've not yet had the opportunity of meeting with the new cabinet minister and to whom I'm accountable. But also I think that obviously the new government is just settling in at this point in time. But if there's any changes to these objectives, I will let the committee know. And the final point I want to raise before we then move on to any questions on my report is obviously to welcome Juliet, which we've done, but also to give sincere thanks to Hugh for his support as our interim commissioner over the last 12 months. I know we persuaded you, I think, to delay your retirement somewhat, and we're very grateful to you for doing that. But I am aware that you retire at the end of the month, Thursday. And so it's not just about thanking you, Hugh, for your support to the JCC over the past 12 months, but also your years of service to the NHS and in Wales. And so thank you very much for that. You'll see there's lots of hands clapping on the virtual screen. So genuinely, thank you, Hugh, for all of your support. Thank you. Any questions on the Chair's report? No, thank you very much. Then we're moving on to highlights from the committees. First of all, the Quality, Safety and Outcomes Committee. Susan, anything you wish to add in relation to that?
Taking the paper as read, Chair, just wanting to really, I think, reference sort of in terms of triangulating, as you said, talking about your Chair's objectives ministerially, but also in terms of the things that appear in the red column in terms of escalate. Of course, we do have strategic reviews and deep dives, but I think it's important for colleagues to note those various things, including the fact in relation to the Caswell Clinic that we still await as the JCC information in terms of evidence from the Caswell Clinic to complete the work there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Susan from the chair of the committee? No, we then note the upward report from the chair of the Quality and Safety and Outcomes Committee, and then on to the Planning, Performance and Finance Committee. Paul.
Thanks, Chair. Again, taking the report as read, only a couple of things to note. One of the things that's sort of at the top of the committee's agenda is obviously the financial pressures that that we're facing this year, and the need to be on the ball at a prompt stage on that, in terms of making sure we're hitting our targets, but identifying any emerging risks prospectively and promptly. So that's one of the things that the committee is determined to sort of keep a close eye on, and the deliverables that are intended to sort of pull us back against the financial risk this year as well. Susan's picked up the point about Caswell. We discussed that. We talked briefly about ambulance performance indicators. It's a bit of a whole new world for both ourselves and WAST as a provider. Welcome the work that's been going on there as well, because we're moving obviously away from traditional to a raft of very useful indicators. So welcome that. But apart from that, nothing else to pick up.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions or comments? No, we therefore note the, sorry, Rob.
Yeah, just on the WAST elements of it, I've been requested to just raise a couple of points around whether the some of the group reviews can be moved back from quarterly to or remain bi-monthly. A little bit of a probably overly operational issue, but it was of enough importance to be asked to raise it today. So if that can be thought about, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Emma?
Yeah, I just suppose wanting to understand why we'd want to have bi-monthly rather than quarterly. If we look at the performance framework from NHS P&I, they only intend to meet us twice a year because we're segment 1. I think there's a piece of work as well. Hugh and I spoke about this recently around actually trying to understand as well what the JCC are managing versus what P&I now want to manage, and making sure we don't double things up. So I'm just conscious that asking us to sort of do more performance management when we're a segment 1 organisation, I feel that as CEO, I'd really want to understand why. I know we've got the service review, which will lead to maybe some outcomes. But yeah, I think I'm not particularly clear on why we'd want to do that.
Thanks so much. Hugh may touch on this in the Chief Commissioner's report shortly, because we have had the response to our planning letter from Welsh Government, which highlights similar issues. So let's just hold that for a moment, if that's okay, Emma. But Ross, do you want to come in quickly on that?
Yeah, sorry, I suppose just linked to that, I think there's importance in having discussion in terms of the required commissioning meetings versus the required local operational discussions that need to be had. But yeah, I'm sure who will pick that up as part of that wider discussion.
Okay, anything else on those report from the Finance, Performance and Planning Committee? Okay, we note that and we'll pick up those other issues shortly. And then Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee, Aaron.
So I take that paper as well. Thank you, Chair. The Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee is the forum we have with Cwmtaf Morgannwg just to provide some assurance over compliance with our internal audit recommendations, risk management processes and procedures, and to give an overview of where we are strategically. I've set out in the report, I suppose, the key things to draw out that the committee are asking for some more information in relation to ambulance performance, specifically 111 delivery. But there's also going to be a need and an ask for us to provide a more detailed update on the transfer of traumatic stress Wales from ourselves to Public Health Wales, who will now host our service. So we'll keep on top of that and make sure those updates are shared with the committee in future. The next meeting's in August, but we'll continue to update as we need to. But those are the two key things to draw out.
Again, I think it goes to the point that Emma made earlier in terms of who's requesting what from whom, making sure that whatever's done is done proportionately and appropriately, but also based on risk as well.
Yeah.
And so that we may, as the commissioner, be seeking further assurance around risk areas, quite rightly and appropriately. But it's important as well that we get that proportionality right in terms of what Cwmtarbl Galley's Audit Committee might be requesting as well, and whether we consider that proportionate or not. So based upon that, a commissioner risk, but also then the risk of a provider. And so that level of understanding and shared understanding is going to be really important as we move forward. So let's not lose that. It's part of the conversation to have later on. Okay, any questions in relation to the hosted audit committee? Okay, thank you very much. So let's move on to the Chief Commissioner's report. Different style of report, I believe, Hugh, this time.
Yes, thank you. So we've taken sort of feedback throughout the year in terms of what members of the committee wanted in terms of the report and how it fits and integrates properly with the directors of the commissioning report. So obviously Juliet will have her own style going forward, but this was meant to bring forward more of the service issues into one report. Still rather long, and most probably can be a bit more brevity in it in terms of going forward. So if there are questions throughout the report, I think it will be a time to bring colleagues in as well. So I didn't intend to go through the report in any detail at all. I was just really going to update and bring out one issue. So Ian referred a minute ago, we had our letter from Welsh Government, from Jacqueline Totterdale in on Friday in respect of our plan. I circulated it to colleagues over the weekend, and we'll circulate it to all committee members later today. Essentially, it is very well. I think it's quite positive in terms of the introduction, the sort of general overview. However, obviously there are areas they've asked us to look at and come back on by the 30th of June. I think the date is. I mean, I think a couple of them are helpful actually. There's obviously a bit of detail in there, but the two big themes to start with, which came through, Emma, there's the conversation around the relationship in terms of performance management through health boards of WAST. And I think it gives us the opportunity to have that conversation, but also put that in writing back to Welsh Government, because there is clearly Welsh Government, P&I, ourselves and WAST involved in that relationship now. And I think it will be very helpful to have the opportunity to actually go back on that. And the second is an area where we've had a number of bits of correspondence throughout this year from officials at Welsh Government in terms of women's services that we don't currently commission and we're not responsible for. However, they keep coming back to us. And again, I feel it will be an opportune time to go back in writing and then set out what we were established to do and what's in there. Those are all issues can be taken forward the next month. And there was nothing in there, in my view, which would seem to be a game stopper. And I think the narrative that Welsh Government are putting there, clearly they don't see it as game stoppers either. So I think that's positive. The other thing I was going to pick up is the first chance we've had to discuss it, deliberately put in this report, but Gwen's going to cover it in much more detail in the month 12 report. There was a sizable positive favourable swing in the financial position in the last month of the year. Now, whilst health boards most probably all welcome positive swings, it's important in terms of transparency and learning going forward to understand where that came from. And so there needs to be work through the finance working group and colleagues to understand how much of that was the quantifiable effect of the actions we took to slow down activity with English providers in the last quarter of the year, and how much of it related to other things. So there's something about getting to the bottom of that. But again, it was a positive message at the end of the year. So I'll stop there. There's an awful lot in there. I'm sure people may want to pick up bits, and I'll bring colleagues in as necessary.
Thanks. So in terms of how to take contributions, perhaps first of all, let's see if there's any issues in terms of mental health, learning disabilities and vulnerable groups. First of all, Emma, is yours in relation to mental health? And yes, Emma.
No, it's not.
No, okay. All right. Let's deal with mental health and see if there are any comments or questions first of all. Okay, ambulances and 111, Emma.
Yeah, sorry, just to say, Hugh, I don't see that letter of commissioning, so I'm not sure whether if you could email it, that'd be great. I haven't got it in my email yet.
Emma, it only arrived on Friday, so I've not shared it with anybody yet. I just shared it with the team over the weekend. We'll share it with colleagues across the committee later today.
Great. I think it'd be useful as well for us to think about if we, that accountability piece between JCC, P&I, because it is beginning, I think we all feel getting a bit complicated. So trying to clarify that, and also what the reciprocal the pieces as well. So, our performance largely is interconnected with the performance, obviously, of health boards, from whether that's alternative pathways of care or handovers. So it's all pretty much connected, and trying to sort of get that better sorted, I think, would be really beneficial. So if this letter gives us an opportunity to do that, I very much welcome that, Hugh.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or observations in relation to the section relating to ambulance services and national programmes? Angela, and then Paul.
Yeah, I've got two questions, and I don't know whether when you want to. So I'll go a question around the CAR-T services and then NEPS. So I don't know if you want to bring NEPS in here or.
Do it now,
two
Angela.
questions.
Yep.
Shall I do NEPS and CAR-T now, or come back with CAR-T?
Do both. Do NEPS now. Sorry, Angela.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, it's just around the update in there is around the Ross has provided around more information. So whilst they're going to go away and do some more information, I'm just wondering when you're expecting that work to be completed. So there's a sort of an update on the review that's been taking place, because we've talked about, haven't we, for a number of board meetings about the issues within the NEP services and the work that's being done to look at the capacity and demand of the services and what could help the service. So recognising that there's more work to be done, just is it a timeline on when we can expect the results of that work?
Ross?
Yeah, Andrew, we've talked about this issue a number of times with me, and the challenge, I guess, is multifaceted, both from a demand and a capacity perspective. So Emma could probably give a bit more detail in terms of where the organisation's at in terms of the revised roster reviews in particular. And I know we've had discussions previously around some of the opportunities that the WAST are undertaking, particularly to but more challenging, I guess, to some of the assessments of the appropriateness of NEPS transfers for individuals. I will look for the next delivery assurance group around NEPS to pick that up. And sorry, I don't know the date off the top of my head, but I'll come back to you outside the meeting.
Thank you.
Paul and Emma.
Yeah, it's only a quick one, Chair. The update on hospices is quite useful. I mean, what we seem to be emerging with is we're playing essentially a brokering role. Am I correct in my sort of assumptions on that?
Yeah, Paul. So I think we don't have responsibility for commissioning hospices. So yeah, we're playing a facilitative role in bringing the sector together with helpful partners to help design, I guess, a future opportunity, of which there may be a commissioning opportunity for the JCC, but to be determined at a later date.
That's grand. Thank you.
Emma? Or muted, Emma?
I'm sorry, our roster rerouting, whatever, is under completion, so that will give us some capacity. But I think I need to remind the JCC that in our business plan for this year, we were very clear that given that it's a year of no investment and indeed potentially disinvestment, we can't grow our NEPS service. So the additional capacity we will get from re-rostering is going to be small. There are other innovations we're doing around text messaging, which is creating about 200-300 appointments, spare appointments a month, if we can get that out with all health boards. Not all health boards have got that technology yet. So again, the interdependencies is really clear for us. But we have been really clear in our annual plan, which was signed off, that we can't add capacity beyond small margins, and that we haven't got the funding to do that this year unless we choose to take other options such as not having as many ambulances, which is clearly not what we're going to do when that's our emergency, space. And actually looking at the eligibility criteria purely from the point of view of there has been a lot of creep in terms of not sticking with the criteria. We need to actually stick with the criteria that the government have given us, which is what we're, I think, meeting with you, Angela, about, I think possibly in the next few weeks or days, because that's going to upset some individuals. It's not changing the criteria, but it's actually implementing it. And then, as you'll also recall, the JCC did commit to work with WAST around what would be the proper and rightful criteria, and can we get the new Welsh government to actually change eligibility criteria that hasn't been moved for over 2 decades, and it's just not fit for purpose. And that piece of work obviously will require the JCC to help us deliver that.
Thanks, Emma. I'm conscious that NEPS is included within the reviews that we are commissioning as a JCC, and we're going to be touching on the scope of those reviews shortly. But Ross, anything you wish to add?
Yeah, sorry, no, Chair, I was just going to add to that in terms of, the committee's previously had discussions, hasn't it, both at development sessions and in public around its appetite and the opportunity for revising the service specification and the expectation around non-emergency patient transport. So I think that's absolutely a piece of work we can pick up under that strategic review. I'm sorry, Chair, just Chair, it was remiss of me, sorry, that I didn't include in the update, and apologies for that. Whilst I've been on leave and sorry, a period of sickness last week, I have received some correspondence from Emma in relation to the development of the rural response model and the work required around that. So I'll take a look at that this week, and obviously at the next meeting we'll provide a more detailed update in terms of the progress.
And Ross, that's due to come back to the committee in November, isn't it, I think?
Yes, but I think I committed previously to bring in regular updates through to the committee. So apologies that it has made it into this one, but I'll make sure that's corrected for next time.
And can we then amend the action that's outstanding to bring an update report in July, and then before a final concluded set of recommendations to respond to the rural ambulance issue that came out of the EMERTS review to the November meeting? Yes, great, thank you. Andrew, is it on this point?
Yeah, sorry, just coming back on that. So recognising, Ross, you need to look at the work that Emma sent over you. We are looking at a summer engagement period then, around late July, August, are we? Public engagement?
I'd need to pick it up, sorry, Angela, and come back.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thanks.
Let's look, again, it's about, I think it's about how we engage and who is responsible for engaging, but that's obviously something that Ross can give some consideration to once he's been fully cited on the Welsh Ambulance Services suggestions. I've just got one in relation to ambulances, is around ambulance patient handover. This obviously is a significant risk. I guess the question that I've got to the committee is what needs to be done differently in order to shift the dial? And Ross, come to you first of all in terms of I'm thinking again from a commissioner's perspective, but also in relation to system leadership as well.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I'm probably a little bit behind the curve on this, because I understand that government or NHS and I have been in some direct conversations with a number of health board colleagues and WAST over the weeks whilst I haven't been around. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say the expectation, as far as I'm aware, hasn't changed in terms of the progress towards handover 45. It was certainly a very prominent feature of the discussions at the Urgent and Emergency Care Summit in, I think it was earlier this month. But yeah, colleagues may be able to give a bit more detail in terms of where individual organisations are up to.
Thanks. Emma?
Yeah, just a couple of points on this. I mean, I'm really grateful for a number of things. So again, P&I, and this again is where I think we need to be really clear on where the accountability sits for what items of our business. But P&I wrote to myself and all chief executives of the health boards to say that they were required to have a plan to deliver handover 45 imminently, and they asked that Abby Swansea, Anara in Bevan and Betsy were the first to come up with their plan. And so what we've been doing is our COOs have been meeting, and there's been a fantastic engagement from the COOs of the health board. So I'd like to acknowledge that and thank that. And the plan is on the 2nd of June that we will meet, the 3 health board chiefs and myself, with Chris Clayton, the MD for P&I, and put forward our plan for collectively for reaching handover 45. And then the anticipation and expectation is that after those 3 health boards have been completed, which are the 3 health boards have just had a little bit more of some challenges delivering handover 45, we will then go to the remaining health boards, which will be Suzanne, yourself, Haldar, Taff, and I probably need to reach out to you all to sort of agree when we would do that. But effectively by the 2nd of June, P&I will have effectively held us as chief executives to account for the delivery of that plan, and I think they expect to then hold the health boards to account. And again, that's the piece for me that feels a bit murky, because where does the JCC sit with that in terms of handover 45? And ambulance performance is obviously very well interconnected. And again, I think that if this commissioning letter that you've received gives us an opportunity to sort of start to work that through, I think that would be useful. But the government has basically, as Ross said, taken charge of this at the moment.
Thanks. So I agree that we need clarification, but we also need to make sure that as the commissioner, if there were 16,000 hours lost in March, we need to understand why, and also be in a position of then, from a commissioning lens, decide what action we are going to take. It may well be that action is in concert with or aligned with, which makes sense with the other activity taking place at the moment, but we just need to make sure that we are fully sighted on that. So making sure that the JCC is in those conversations, I think, is really important as a commissioner. Thank you for that, though, really helpful. And again, that the letter from Welsh Government might facilitate getting that clarification and understanding about respective roles and responsibility. Anything else on ambulance and 111 and national programmes? Move on to specialist services. Any questions on specialist services that anyone wishes to flag? Angela, you had a point, I think.
Yes, thank you. And it's just on the CAR-T services. So you mentioned that you're having conversations with providers in England, a just in case scenario. I was just wondering where those providers were, how those conversations are going, and do we know exactly how many patients would be affected by if the certificate was removed and would need to go elsewhere?
Yeah, so we've got some ongoing conversations with English providers across the board around surge capacity, because we've got limited CAR-T capacity because the numbers are so small. So if we have some at the same time, we would need to have that surge capacity. So they are around the country. We've got Bristol and Birmingham and just outside London. So, there are opportunities across the patch for the South Wales cohort. North Wales patients flow into Christie at the moment. And the conversations are positive. NHS England have made a step change in their capacity in order to prepare for new indications being approved. So they've been positive so far. Obviously, with relation to the JACI certification, we've got around 20 to 30 patients a year would be the prediction for CAR-T. So if the certification wasn't achieved come July, then that would be the cohort that we'd be looking to move outside of Wales. Obviously, it's complicated for patients because, these are systemic treatments that can make you very poorly. So how we manage those patients then and any potential complications around the treatment would be part of some of the contingency, because it might be that we would continue to offer some of those wraparound and support arrangements more locally. But obviously that has cost implications then for us as a commissioner, but would have benefits for the patient in terms of convenience, etc.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think I was just going to make a point around the CAR-T. So what within the paper, it describes a potential derogation as a mitigation. And I think we would have to think about that very carefully as commissioners, because I think we would be knowingly commissioning substandard service. And why would we do that? I have anxieties as the provider as to what the implications of that in the long-term development of the service would be, and whether or not the provider, which I am at this point, would want to take a derogation. So I think that is a very risky mitigation, which I don't think has been fully assessed or discussed.
So we're having obviously ongoing conversations with Cardiff as a provider, and a derogation has formed part of that. Obviously, some of that is also with Swansea Bay as the provider of the autologous transplants, and so it's not necessarily about derogating all of the services, because a lot of the concerns are around the estate. It's whether there could be a derogation to offer more in the other centre while the mitigations are put in place for the main centre. So I understand that they're all linked, and this is part and parcel. We've had a draft case through from Cardiff as a provider around what it might take in order to put this on a more sustainable footing, and there are revenue consequences for us as commissioners, as well as the capital position, which is obviously more pressing, which will require support from Welsh Government. We're awaiting the official submission of that following its presentation at Finance and Performance Committee tail end of last week, and as of this morning I hadn't seen that. Whether that's coming elsewhere in the organisation, I haven't seen it as of yet.
Goes to the rub, doesn't it, in terms of some of the challenges that we've acknowledged that we are facing as a commissioner, and acknowledging the pressure that places on the provider in terms of how do we get away from commissioning services that are going to automatically be fragile, but at the same time making sure that we are understanding what needs to be done differently. And that's, I guess, where, not in relation to this matter, but in terms of service reviews, needs to be giving us some of the solutions to some of those issues about how, as a commissioner, we are commissioning strategically, acknowledging that the responsibility we have for specialist services, which are, as a matter of course, generally far more expensive, and where's the best provider for those services.
And there's a balance, isn't there, between the Welsh Government priorities about having, Welsh residents having access to emerging technologies close to home, and the cost of that, the potential sustainability issues, balanced with making sure that we're delivering value, and that we do have sustainability across the piece, and we're not creating more fragile services.
Suzanne, Rob, Nia.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ian, you made the point that you've made it better than I did, really, that this is a commissioning challenge, particularly where you've got the delivery of service, some elements of which are dependent on capital, which would come from Welsh Government. So I think we've got to be really clear around this table what our function is, that is to commission the highest quality service for patients, that as fully as possible meets their needs. And that's my real point, regardless of whether it's Cardiff or Swansea. I think if we're talking about component parts of a pathway and the derogation being described as Mel's describing, then I do think that the committee has to be really clear which bits of the pathway are being derogated and which aren't, and what that looks like in terms of a pathway of care. I'm just really keen that we don't, and I think you've said it, Ian, we don't sort of, by a desire to do the right thing and keep services local, we don't sustain an unsustainable service in the absence of clarity about what the future would hold in terms of capital investment and so forth.
Thanks, Suzanne. Rob, then Ian.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of points on that, really, and just to support what's been said. So one of the questions around the wider pathway, because I know in Aneurin and Bevan we're seeing quite significant requirements for IVIG drugs linked to CAR-T, so I'm not sure that's been factored in the mix in the overall pathway. Don't know if there's opportunities there, possibly. I'm not that close to it. But I would, I think, reaffirm what Suzanne's mentioned is local in Wales is fine as long as it's sustainable, and it's not always the best thing to do. I can say that because we're near the border, others are less so. So I do appreciate that as well. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Rob. And I think that in terms of making sure then that we're utilising the opportunity through the service reviews and deep dives to take what might be considered to be brave decisions and being prepared to follow those through is going to be absolutely crucial. And acknowledging that there will be some challenges with those, but we know that the current arrangements aren't working. Nia.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think the points were made, actually. I was thinking about the whole pathway, not just if we're derogating a service, are there other knock-on cost and inconvenience and other implications? I think Rob just answered my question about IVIG drugs and stuff. So it's not just if the service can be delivered, but what knock-on implications does that have to patients and to the health service?
Thanks, Nia. Anything else on specialist services? I'm going to be really cheeky and revert us back to mental health and vulnerable groups, I'm afraid, because I had two which I completely forgot about. So could you say a bit more about St Andrews and in terms of where things are currently? Because my understanding is that NHS England are potentially looking at an alternative provider for St Andrews, and what's the implication for us there? And then secondly, in terms of gender services, the approach that, can you give an update on the approach that we're taking around undertaking that review? And I guess that links back to, as you'll see from my objectives, there was a specific responsibility that I had to make sure to the Cabinet Secretary that I was keeping him cited on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, on St Andrews, it's recently been reported that they are looking at retaining some capacity within the site. So NHS England are looking at alternative provider arrangements to retain some capacity. That's not going to impact Welsh patients. So for Welsh patients, there is still a requirement to move the patients out. The timescale for that is June. So currently we have 6 Welsh patients remaining at the site, and that's from a starting point of 22 when the issues and concerns were raised. And arrangements are in place to move those patients, albeit there are some challenges with some of the complexity in arranging the right placements for them. But June is the timeframe that we're looking to have that in place by, and we are engaging in national level meetings with NHS England routinely over the course of arranging that, and engagement with patients at the site is ongoing as well to ensure safety and their safe care during the process. On the gender review, so we are in the process currently of reviewing the Welsh Gender Service, and I think just for a reminder, what we commission as the JCC is the gender care pathway, which for Welsh patients, which includes the assessment, the referral, and the ongoing care, and referrals through to surgery, which is run by NHS England and providers in England. So that review is incorporating an independent element, and it gives us the potential to apply the same approach, the same methodology and metrics as NHS England did previously last year. So there is just one gender service in Wales, which is the Welsh Gender Service. And we have commenced the review, and we'll look at kind of demand capacity, cost, quality of the service over the coming months, bringing back a report in Q3 or Q4 as we commence that review. And the potential, as I mentioned, to commission the same expertise as part of that independent aspect of the review as was commissioned in England, and that there's also benefits from the time frame in relation to taking some of the learnings and recommendations that have come through from the Levy review in England as well. So that is progressing.
Just very quickly, just to the providers engaged in that, but also we're engaging service users as part of that review.
Yes, so we're currently in the scoping and methodology aspect of the review, but absolutely that will be incorporated too.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Anything else on learning disabilities, vulnerable groups, as I've gone back to it? Paul.
Sorry, Chair. Can I be cheeky and go back to specialist services?
You certainly can, Paul.
Yeah, just on the hereditary anemia service, talks about a business case being processed. Wonder if there's a timescale on that.
No.
So we're waiting for some timescales on the business case in order to plan it in the work plan going forward. So we've formally written to Cardiff to ask for it. The commissioning team is working with the service team on, what that might take, but we've formally written in at an exec level, so we'll await that. But yeah, that'll be part of the work plan for the year.
Okay, thank you.
Grant,
Anything
thank you.
else? Anything else on any item in the Chief Commissioner's report that anyone wishes to flag? Okay, so we note the report. Moving on then to the item in relation to organisational risk register, Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of the conversations we had at the Chief Commissioner's report touching on hereditary anemias, Jackie accreditation stuff quite helpfully feed into this. So we'll take those updates in relation to those risks that are reported in the organisational risk register as haven't already been discussed, unless anybody wants to raise anything specifically in relation to the register. But I think just a very brief overview, taking the report as read. The report provides an update, or a year-end closing update, is the 31st of March. So obviously there will be updates looking at the financial position and the risks that follow delivery of our annual plan, our strategic reviews and deep dives now over the following couple of months. So we will expect to see some movement over the years. Some of those areas that we may not have prioritised in year start to come to fruition, and some of those risks feed through the system. I suppose that work will also be supplemented and supported by the development and sort of delivery of our joint committee assurance framework, which has been shared with the committee in July, which will look to set out some strategic risks the organisation will look to monitor and manage over the course of the remainder of the year moving forward. And we'll ask the committee to look at those for approval. They'll also be shared with the committee at our strategy day in June. It's currently in circulation with the senior leadership team as well. So we'll make sure everybody's briefed on that. But looking at the 15 risks that are reported, 13 relate to Commissioner risks, 2 sort of corporate risk, finance and high cost medicines. But just focusing on the 2 that have moved in the reporting period. So risk 638, and that's a risk that's been de-escalated previously, but that re-escalated due to performance issues and quality issues. And it's just a flag in the report after being de-escalated to a 16. It's now moved back up, and that's the specialist auditory implant device service at Cardiff Vale. It's moved back up to a 16, so but that's continuing to be monitored through our usual commissioning routes and performance meetings. And there's also the obesity surgery risk that's been de-escalated at Salford Royal Hospital. So again, that was something that was escalated in July and March following the service and notice on that contract coming to an end. Some mitigations have been put in place, and that's now been mitigated to a 16 down from a 20. So unless anybody has any specific questions for directors on the call for individual risks, I'm open to any questions as well on the process that we're following.
So on this 68, in terms of auditory implant device services, what's the learning from us then in terms of taking the service out of escalation and having to put it back with actually a relatively short period of time into escalation?
So it's still in escalation. It was just the risk. So there was some mitigation against the risk to getting the weights under 52 weeks. What we haven't been able to get to is a sustainable position to be able to maintain the weights under 52 weeks. So we continue to meet with them on a monthly basis as part of the escalation process. So they're still in escalation level 3.
Okay, right, thanks. Emma, then Lee.
Yeah, thank you. My main question is whether or not the JCC will want to post the review that I know Hugh and Ross commissioned with the independent advisor on the Manchester Arena inquiry recommendations that we've been for a number of years bringing to JCC around funding, noting that some of that funding does need to come from Welsh Government, so I accept that. But there's no risk on the risk register around how the JCC's lack of funding impacts potentially our WAS's ability to manage our civil contingencies responsibilities. And I just wonder if we might consider opening up such a risk now that we've got the report back, which has an independent review of the recommendations that we've made, noting that we know that none of us can afford it.
And I'm conscious that we're in a public arena at the moment, and the JCC have had a conversation in committee in relation to the report you just mentioned. So I'm just very cautious in terms of what we say in this forum. I think it's important, though, that, and the committee agreed, that we will bring a report into the public arena at our July meeting. And I think also that linked to that, there's obviously was a position put in the IMTP for this year, which I think was also placed into WAS IMTP. So I'm not quite sure whether the funding issue you've stated is entirely appropriate, but let's not go into that now. I think it's important that we do that in an appropriate space, but not today.
I think I'm working with Aaron Foley. I'm working with Ross's team as well over the course of the next few weeks. We have been working together, and we are looking at reframing a lot of our risk we hold within the ambulance service. But they'll be reported in a commissioner focus, obviously taking into consideration the patient and service impacts that are presented for the current landscape we're in. But they will be presented in very much commissioner focus, and how we're going to manage them moving forward as well.
Lee.
Thanks. Yeah. So there are risks in risk relating to emergency ambulance service, but I just wondered, given the conversation we had earlier, and I've written to Ross separately as well, cancellations we're seeing within NEPTs and other challenges with that service, whether we need to consider a risk relating to NEPTs.
But I suppose what's key to mention with the risk register as well, these are extreme risks that we're holding as an organisation, and those gone 15 or above. And I'm not saying that any of those risks aren't sort of causing significant issues for patients and services, but these are the risks that are feeding through on as a 15 or above. There will be risks that are held in relation to NEPs and lots of other services that sit below that. And not to steal Ross's thunder, you might tell me I'm wrong, but and I think as we move forward, we'll be looking to reintegrate the way we report in our organisation or risk more specifically anyway, so they're more aligned to our strategic risks moving forward. So there will be some movement in these, but it will only be those risks scoring 15 or higher on the register, or those that are specifically unusual that present a unique risk to the organisation.
Thank Ross, then Nia.
Yeah, thanks. I suppose, yeah, Lee, just building on Aaron's comment about the work we've been doing about revising the risks. So I said this is not unique to ambulances. It's I guess, potentially similar across the JC's portfolio in terms of those demand and capacity mismatches and the challenges that commissioners have then in servicing those. So we have been reflecting on how we articulate that across the breadth of services that we commission from the Welsh Ambulance Service in terms of the totality of the impact on the population. So yeah, we'll bring that forward as our work completes.
Thanks, Nia.
Yeah, I think I say this every time, so sorry about that. But I'm glad, I welcome all the work that's been done reframing the risks. I recognise the risk register looks very different now from what it used to. I just wanted to point out that what people feel out there in the public, that we are shuffling things around, and we just need to make sure that we are bearing in mind what it feels like for people outside while we're doing it. And I know it has to be done in the correct way and everything, but we also have to think about the Welsh public. I know we all are thinking about it.
So no, if I can come back on that, it's a point well made. It's a point that's been reflected internally as well when we've been having these discussions about reframing risks. And even though we're talking about these from a commissioner perspective, the commissioner risks we face are always informed by a patient, an equity, or a service performance issue. So they're not just that we're not just saying we're a commissioner, there's a financial aspect to this. This is what the risk is to us. It's very much informed by issues or impacts that are impacted on people and populations and sort of services. So the commissioner focused risks are derived from patient service impacts rather than it just being very much we're commissioners. We're devolved sort of derogating ourselves from that sort of aspect of the risk.
I think we can tease some of this out, can't we, during the June workshop, when we're going to be undertaking a bit more detailed work around our approach to risk and risk appetite in particular. Hayley. Hayley, was your hand raised? Okay. Sorry, we'll come back to you. When you get unmuted, even if we moved on, we'll take your point then, don't worry. Anything else on risk? As we note the report, thank you for that. Moving on then to delivering the plan item and the financial report to month 12 and also month 1. Again, when we read the report, anything particularly you should tease out for us?
No, as Hugh identified earlier, the position did improve at the year end from our forecast of 6.8 million deficit to 6.3. That was down to a reduction of activity, particularly within Betsy, and also we'd put some, we'd the rest of the money that we'd held in contingency with regards to potentially the year end was released. So essentially that did improve our position for the year end. In terms of month one, obviously there's not an awful lot of information with regards month one. Just to update that we're working towards getting our LTAs all signed by the end of this month, working closely with a number of different organisations there. And then the third thing with regards this year is there's a paper that attached which sets out the budget delegations to individual budget holders and directors of each service to identify their budgets for the coming year, and we'll be working very closely with those in terms of the budget management, and particularly reviewing opportunities for efficiency and sustainability and linking into potential savings collaboratively across the wider system as well. So that's very quick, but I don't know if anybody's got any questions. Our accounts draft accounts have been submitted and they will be signed off last year at the end of June.
I've got a question on month one, but any questions first of all on month 12? Rob.
Sorry, mine's on month one as well. So
okay, right. Let's hold on then. Okay. Paul. You're muted, Paul.
I will come back to question on month one, but just to reflect on month 12, that's encouraging. I know how hard the respective teams have worked on pulling that back. So that's a positive outcome for month 12. Just wanted to note that.
I agree with you that shift in month, but we still missed our plan. And I think that's the key issue that we just need to be clear about. We agreed a plan at the start of the year. We weren't able to achieve that. So I think getting the balance right, I know that shifted from a £20 million deficit to down to just over a £6 million deficit. But actually, there's something about being able to meet the plan that we've set, and that probably links on to the question I've got in relation to month one. So £900,000 deficit in month one, full year impact of that estimated to be 100,000. Could you unpack that a bit more for us, Gwen? And what action are we taking at this point in time in order to avoid us being in a position in 3 months' time when we've got a deficit as we'd have last year?
Okay, the in-month position, like I said, for month one is quite difficult because we don't have a lot of information to work with, and accepting that it's quite a big difference between the month one and the forecast end of year position largely reflects where we were at a point of time in terms of agreeing our LTAs. So I'm anticipating for month two, we will be in a sort of more of a break-even position, which reflects the year-end expectation for the coming year.
Okay, Rob, was your question similar to mine?
It was, but I did want to go a little bit deeper in terms of the confidence levels of the savings and any unintended consequences of providers trying to make savings. If anything's emerged.
Okay, so we have been working obviously both from the provider side and the commissioner side in terms of looking at the pipeline of opportunities, and we've got our efficiency and sustainability programme is sort of forging forward in terms of identifying a pipeline of opportunities. So that work is well in train now.
I guess my question is, as we progress through the year, to ensure that this is a cost saving, but if there are service implications, then we need to be aware of those very quickly.
Yeah.
Did you want to come in?
Thanks. I was just going to add to that in terms of obviously month one under timing. I mean, I'm aware that we have reached agreement on LTAs with, I believe, all but one of the health boards now. There remains the possibility of arbitration with the final health board. That's the position they're citing at the moment. Obviously, that would be extremely unfortunate, and it's around the 2% savings target.
Okay. Abby.
Thank you. It was that issue about the savings plan. So it was a similar issue to the one that Rob raised, making sure that we're crystal clear. So if we're having a projection to where we need to be at year end, it's confidence that that pipeline will actually materialise and be delivered, and what the consequences of that are. I'm a health board that doesn't have an approved plan, so it needs, for me, as a provider, and I know this is a commissioning conversation, not a provider conversation, but that needs to be taken in the round with the other savings pipeline and programme that we have in place, which is still not fully articulated. So it's making sure this is done in, as you say, Gwen, in conjunction with the health boards. And the feedback I've had is we haven't quite got line of sight on what that would look like, and making sure we're not double counting things that are in different places in terms of commissioner and provider responsibility. So I do think, Rob, it probably needs a bit more work to give us that assurance and clarity.
Thanks, Abby. And I think that maybe we need to take this away, but what more detail are we going to need in this report when it comes to JCC meetings about the level of assurance that we are seeking around, both in terms of business as usual performance, but also in terms of the savings that we identified last month, in March, that need to be pulled through in order to make the plan work. And that maybe we just can't do that in month one, but month two onwards, I think it's going to be really important that we have that level of granularity, so that remedial action can be taken urgently, quickly, rather than let things drift. So again, it's about, and I'm not clear myself what that might look like, and Paul, you might be also seeking that sort of level of assurance for the Finance Planning and Performance Committee as well. But I think that we just need to make sure that we're getting cited on that as early as possible, so that appropriate remedial action could be taken. But Paul, coming first of all.
Yeah, you read my mind, Chair. Exactly that. I mean, clarity and granularity were the two words that popped to mind. And we've talked about the fact of using the Finance Planning and Performance Subcommittee as a method of tracking, particularly in between board meetings. Conscious of the fact that it's month one, but at the same time, we've got a plan that is quite a high level of financial risk. We need to make sure that also we're not over optimistic. We don't have an optimism bias in terms of reporting. If there are issues and challenges, we need to get them up front and then ask the question of what are we doing about them. So, I mean, the finance report is extremely helpful, but we do need that granularity, we do need that clarity, and we do need that honesty as well. So, yeah, and use the committee in any way we can.
Okay,
Suzanne and Nia.
Yeah, so I was just really going to repeat what others have said, but just to recall the committee's collective memory. When we approved this plan, we did so with a high degree of risk, not a high degree of confidence, because we didn't have specification on any really detail of the savings plans, either in the 16 million, which was the gap, or in the 2% provider savings. And unless something has materially changed, I don't believe we're in any more confident position now. So that risk was accepted on plan submission. Now we need to be clear how we're going to manifest and articulate the actual tangible savings that will be taken to address that risk. So in answer to Rob's question, I would say I've got low confidence at this point.
Yeah, that's right, Suzanne. And I think that's in terms of that we're then in a position to either get that assurance or not in the report that comes in for month two, acknowledging that there's less clarity in month one. Although I sometimes like to think, let's forget month 12 and month one, just have an ongoing role of performance delivery would be more helpful. Nia.
Yes, my fear is always that it's too early to know until it's too late to know. Do you know? Until it's too late to do anything about it. And do you know what I mean? So can we just formally say in month two that we this is an expectation that I don't know what good that'll do, but can we formally have an expectation that this will be have been addressed in month 2?
You?
Just to agree, really. I think last year, I think we brought the first real indication of the financial position and the challenging financial position to July, and then we focused on every month thereafter. So I think month 2, using June figures, using June figures in June, using month 2 figures in June's meeting would be extremely good place to start. Obviously, Gwen's covering today, Stacey's not here as well. We've had a lot of conversations. You'll recall the slides we brought in terms of the 16 million, which has been deemed as the additional commissioner contribution, and what commissioning savings we could look to mitigate those this year. And so Stacey is working with the team to make sure that reports are brought on that 16 million. I think the understanding is we most probably won't get there this year, and there'll be need for an additional contribution, but however, there needs to be inroads into it this year as well. So I think the final point I'd say is we set a plan based on the assumption that is a 2% provider saving, and we would work collaboratively with providers to assist in finding that 2%. Ultimately, our position is assuming that is made, and that has been agreed with 6 of the all but one of the health boards.
When will we be in a position to receive month 2's figures?
Will be it will be towards the end of June.
So not in time for our development session on the 3rd week of June.
We will have a good indication by then.
I think there's something about making sure that there is, and whether it's a scrutiny takes place here or there's a meeting of the Finance Planning Performance Committee at an appropriate stage to scrutinise month 2 position, and to then, even if it's done via email, giving some assurance out to the committee. I think that I don't feel comfortable waiting until July, to be honest. I think there's something that we need to be, as soon as we get in month 2's figures, we need to be reviewing that and deciding if there's any mitigation or any further, as Suzanne's point, what further detail can be provided in order to obtain assurance.
Yeah, definitely we can do something for them. I'm sorry, I don't know what the date of that meeting is, but we can look to get whatever we can to that session.
Yeah, I think it's the 16th, so it's probably going to be too soon. But Paul, we may want to have a conversation about whether or not the 16th is a development session, isn't it? When's the next finance and performance?
2nd of July.
2nd of July.
2nd of July. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that might be okay. Let's take that away. I think what I'm hearing from members of the committee is that we've seen month 1's figures. That what's shifted between the approval of the plan and now, and what further action is required in order to get to a position when we have a better sight on the delivery of the plan for 26-27, and where are the risks, and how are we going to identify those risks so we can take appropriate and timely action. Paul?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd be keen to have next, as we said, 2nd of July is the next FPP. I'd be keen to have that as a kind of main focus, and any information, however incomplete and imperfect at the time.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to
have a discussion offline about that as well.
I was going to say, Paul, we'll maybe have a conversation as well prior to that, so that you're well sighted on it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's note the position now, acknowledging that there's further assurance required. That will come back initially to the 2nd of July Finance and Performance Committee, and then with that coming to the July JCC meeting. But we need. I think it's about being really clear in terms of what we need to do in relation to whatever is presented to us in terms of the plan. Okay. Thank you very much, Gwen. Any other comments? Should we move on to the performance report? Anything you wish to bring to our attention, Gwen?
No, I think a lot of the points that are contained within the report have already been covered off in part of the other reports. So unless anybody's got any questions, I'm happy that it's noted.
Anything in addition to what we've covered already in the Chief Commissioner's report, in the performance report? Angela.
Yeah, just to confirm, we're talking about the performance report, agenda item 3.2.
Correct. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I just got a question about the bariatric services being provided in Swansea Bay at the moment for North Wales residents. Just a couple of questions. I just wondered how patients are being supported to travel. I'm wondering if it's a NEP service, and do we know how many patients this is involved? And then my final question is around, are you having any conversations with service providers back up in North Wales to hopefully bring that to care closer to home for people, in the long term, recognizing the Swansea Bay are helping out in a difficult situation at the moment.
Yeah, so at the moment we've got 11 patients who are affected, who are urgent on the urgent list that we would seek to be bringing down to Swansea Bay. Those patients at the moment have, I believe, and I'll check this, all been able to travel by themselves and haven't required NEP support, but we can check and make sure that that's the case. We have had some conversations with some providers in the Northwest, and we will start a designated provider process within the next few weeks in order to try and identify a North Wales provider going forward. But we would seek to have some more robust interim arrangements with Swansea for the remainder of this year in order to be able to manage some of those urgent patients until such a time as we have another North Wales provider.
Thank you. Thank you.
Paul?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, looking at the performance report, particularly on the sort of mental health issues, there's obviously still some quite low rates of utilisation in various places. Wonder if you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So part of the strategic review, which we'll pick up in the next part of the agenda, is will encapsulate some of that aspect in relation to medium secure, but we're also looking with providers over the course of the next year around occupancy rates across the CAM services as well, and particularly how the model of care can assist in helping us to look at improved occupancy, but importantly improved outcomes for patients as well, where that's appropriate.
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful. Yeah, it's obviously a key part of the review. No, really helpful.
Anything else?
I just pick up one on the internal workforce one. So looking through there, I didn't want to skip over the fact that we're red for performance appraisals. I think everything we're discussing here is we've got a really tough year ahead, and so we need to be supporting our staff to deliver. So I'd like to see that on our refocus over the coming months.
Okay, good point to make. Any other issues? Okay, let's note the report and let's then have a break now until 11:45. It may well, we've got 2 hours allocated for the strategic priority deep dive specifications. I'm just conscious we're probably not going to need that amount of time, acknowledging that we had a discussion about our development in terms of the principles and the areas to focus upon. So it's just really agreeing the specifications at this point in time. So George, I'm looking to you in terms of probably an hour.
Yeah, I think we've got lead chief executives involved in the development of these scopes, so hopefully Sean will come through that route as well. But the time is discussed for us.
So let's try and see if we can contain that within an hour if we can. So of course that's a big old long slot, and we just need to make sure that we're managing that time, and also people having the ability to have some lunch as well. Let's stop there until 1:45. So it's just over a 10-minute break. Apologies for that slight delay. I think we're now ready to reconvene. We're now moving on to item 3.3, which is the annual plan delivery and the strategic priority and deep dive specifications. Again, just to give some context to colleagues, chief executives and lay members will be aware that we had a development session about 6 weeks ago now, when we looked at the principle around the service strategic priority reviews and the deep dives, and agreed those in principle to make sure they came back to this committee for formal approval, but particularly in terms of the plan of action, the scope of the work being approved today. I know that George will say a bit more about this in a moment. A lot of work has taken place in the interim, both in terms of the relevant directorates within the JCC, but also conversations with the lead chief executive in each of those areas, and also the linked layperson as well, the lay member. So hopefully there's been plenty of conversations. So not much of this should come as a surprise to colleagues, but again, it'd be useful just to get the context of that agreed, so we can then make sure that we hit our timescales of some preliminary recommendations coming back in September and final recommendations in the November JCC meeting. George, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So as you said, we've agreed in our annual plan that we have 8 strategic priority areas split into strategic reviews, deep dives and enabling projects. We've added a further project for sustainability and efficiency that Gwen touched on earlier, and that is something that's been run relatively internally, but we do have lay member leadership from Ian on that as well. So each of the areas have got a lead chief executive, a lay member and a JCC director, and that's highlighted in each of the scoping documents attached. We've also tried to seek CCLG links as well, because we do want to continue using CCLG as that advisory forum for joint committee decisions as they work their way up to decisions at the joint committee. So for advice and assurance, we're really keen to keep CCLG clearly linked into the work. The scope documents attached to the overarching paper, they're all of a consistent format, but we do acknowledge that the approach might be slightly different depending on the focus of the work. So the strategic reviews will take a slightly different approach to the deep dives, for example. But what we are doing with each of these scope documents is setting the expectations of what is going to be delivered within this year, the timescales for which, and actually allow the joint committee to be really clear about what we are going to hold ourselves to account on at year end. So it'll be a reference document that we come back to and make sure that we track that pace and delivery. So the only other thing I really wanted to add is the whole of this work will be reported on back to committee. It's going to feed into the IMTP for the JCC for next year. And it's all aimed at strengthening commissioning oversight, pathway optimisation and productivity, and really help inform those future commissioning decisions. So they're all critical pieces of work in that instance. So I think the focus of the conversation really now ought to be on the content of the scoping document. So I'll hand over to the relevant joint committee directors, who will obviously bring in chief executive leads as necessary, and I'll hand over to Sue for a start with the mental health.
George, before you do, can I just check to see if there's any conversation that anyone needs to have in terms of the principles, first of all?
Oh, okay, yeah.
This is the first time that you've come into the public domain. Any issues in terms of the principle of this approach that we've had a number of conversations about, but obviously not had the position to discuss properly in committee? I'm not seeing any hands raised. Oh, sorry, Julia, yes.
Sorry, and I've not been involved with any of the discussion at all, but thank you. And I like the approach, and it was really good to get my head around and to understand it quite quickly. Mine was just on the principle right at the beginning, and the cover document doesn't mention improved outcomes at all. It's all about finances and pathways. When you get into the detail, outcomes are pulled out, but I do just wonder whether there's something about upfront being really clear that we should highlight that.
Yes, absolutely spot on, Julia. Yeah, we do need to make sure that it is, as you say, within the detail of the scoping documents as the deliverables and the focus, but you're right, it probably should be more.
Thanks. very much. Suzanne.
Yeah, maybe this is sort of Juliet's point, but I'm wondering about value and securing the best use of resources and value should be a key driver for this work, which is different from the lowest possible cost or
Yeah.
And might lead us to some of the configuration conversations that we've been thinking about.
Dodging, maybe. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, again, I totally agree, and I think that value, sustainability, efficiency all comes through. And sorry, one other thing I should have said about the sustainability and efficiency program that we've established is that it's cross-cutting. So going back to the conversation we had earlier about finding those savings, we will be picking up and drawing all of that those elements from each of the strategic oversight pieces of work and bringing it together so that we don't lose any of the efficiency and sustainability activities that are falling out from these areas as well.
Sorry, Sue.
Oh, thank you. So firstly, just looking at the mental health strategic review. And I think just to note from the last conversation, we have looked at refining the focus and the prioritisation of this review to consider the model of care for secure inpatient mental health care in Wales, whereas previously we had mentioned a broader scope which potentially looked at younger people as well. So, so the review is fundamentally about considering the model of care for secure inpatient mental health, ideally to improve patient outcomes and experience, but looking at that whole pathway and quantum of JCC commissioned beds, which includes NHS and independent sector beds, and importantly, the interface with Health Board commissioned low secure beds. So what we're looking to achieve is to make recommendations in Q3 on the right services, the right configuration, and the most appropriate model of care to meet population need within medium secure and across that interface with low secure, and importantly, supporting patients to access care and support closer to home. And alongside that, I think picking up the earlier points, it's also about driving improvements to the current system now. So looking at how we can achieve greater grip and control of sign-off processes, in-year and case management arrangements to improve the flow throughout the system, and potentially reducing the length of stay or improving patient outcomes and experience in their placement location as well. And critically, I think picking up the earlier point, doing this through a clear efficiency lens, ensuring that we are delivering maximum value, both financially and for patient outcomes from the existing resources, again, in year. And I think just picking up why this matters now. So earlier conversations drew on the fact that there is an appetite to review the model of care across current commission providers. There's some underutilisation of NHS capacity, whilst there's also a growing reliance on the independent sector. We're aware that in some cases patients are placed too far from home, and there is some variation in decision making and pathways across referral management and case management, where we can certainly, through reviewing that, drive some efficiency and look at the ongoing process for the future. So I think it gives us an opportunity to reset, to move to a more planned, equitable, consistent and a sustainable model of care, looking at that full quantum, as I mentioned, of commissioned beds across the JCC and the interface with low secure. So the deliverables that we're seeking to achieve are bringing back recommendations on the future model of care and commissioning approach to the committee in Q3. And starting from now, looking at how we can drive improvements to the system to realise those in-year efficiencies. And that will focus in two areas. One, which is strengthening referral management and improving case management oversight, in it largely to do with the placements through the framework in the independent sector, and achieving greater grip and control of that placement sign-off process. And then also looking at how we optimise through repatriation and admissions, the NHS commission provision, and bring patients closer to home in that focus as well. There's some reference within the scoping document of the anticipated in-year efficiencies that we would look to achieve in both of those areas. And the ask at this point is to support the overall direction of travel and also in readiness for bringing back those recommendations in Q3. But I'd also like to kind of thank Hayley and Shamim and Marie, who's not with us, for their support in refining the scope, and to hand over to Hayley if there's anything that she wanted to add at this point as well.
Hayley, anything at this point you want to add?
I think from my point of view, the key issue here is about the conversation that we've had around the scope being defined, recognising we might need to take a phased approach later for some of the other priorities that we talked about, because it's a different level of engagement, different stakeholders dependent on the pieces of work that we're undertaking. I guess one of the issues from my point of view, and it's a general point across all of the service briefs and strategic review specifications, is about how we've been working at pace on this. So this is something that's coming straight to the JCC, having not had really an opportunity more broadly to speak to other chief executives about the scope. So one of the issues for me around the programme architecture around these service reviews and strategic reviews is how they link into the overall governance of the JCC, checks and balances before they come through to for discussion here. So that's something we can work on. But yeah, I think it's been a really helpful conversation that we've had, and I can see there may be views that we should have made the scope broader, but this was about recognising also the substantial amount of other pieces of work, because this will need really strong interdependency with health boards, and when you look at all of the priorities, not just within the JCC span of control, but more broadly around mental health, then we recognise that we need to define the scope a little bit more clearly in order for it to be achievable. Thanks.
Shamim, anything you wish to add?
Only that I really support the direction of travel. I think for me, the focus has been around the patient experience and outcomes, and I really think this is going to be a positive for that, as well as kind of realising some efficiencies, which is a big point. But I know Sue's got really. She's really with me on the focus of on the patient and not kind of losing sight on that on all the way through this. So I'm really supportive of the direction of travel.
Thanks, Shamim. Abby. You're muted, Abby.
So I am, sorry. Thank you very much for this, and thank you for the overview, Sue and Hayley. I just wanted to ask a question about the opportunity of linking in with colleagues across the border, because I'm aware that obviously there'll be a North Wales and a South Wales position on this, and actually looking at what is the critical mass in terms of planning and provision for a population. And I'm just very aware that in England, NHS England's delegated this down to provider collaboratives. And I just wondered, Sue, what conversation or opportunity is there to look at any potential benefit of collaborating and working with our nearest provider collaborative in England?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is real opportunity to do that, and certainly that's a similar conversation that came up last week. I visited T. Llewellyn in North Wales, and again, the opportunity to look across the border to England is something that they raised as well. So I think that will be in scope of the review, albeit it's not explicitly referenced within the scoping document at the moment. But it's a stakeholder we certainly need to add into the intention in terms of driving that forward.
Okay, so perhaps add that into the stakeholder list on page 175, 387. Any other points in terms of the mental health scope? Okay, let's go through these and then we'll see if there's any fundamental issues as we've addressed them. But we're moving on now to the neonatal review.
Yeah, with Carol as the JC.
Carol. JCC Carol, then the other Carol. Carol Bell first. Carol, I don't think we can hear you. No? Try again, Carol. No.
Shall I help,
Oh,
Chair?
Carol. Yeah, thank you,
You
Carol.
can clearly never have enough carols, so there we are. So I'm sure the other Carol will fix that technical problem. Yeah, thanks for this. So this is a really quite tricky area, of course, because there are a number of strands of work happening both within the JCC but out with in relation to maternity and neonatal services. So we need to be mindful of the wider context on this. When we met to discuss the scope and the approach of this work, we were really clear that we needed to be quite pragmatic and also recognise that there's been quite a lot of work in this area, both in the past in Wales, but also across other parts of the UK. So the real focus for this piece is to let's do a discovery piece of work. Let's understand what the configuration of services looks like elsewhere and what really the challenges would be for us here in Wales before we jump to conclusions. So I probably just want to manage a little bit one of the statements that we say this configuration is not reflective of population requirements, because I think there's a need for us to undertake a pragmatic review of access across highly rural areas as well as in the urban centres. But what is clear is this does need a really good look at again. So we had a very positive meeting, thanks to JCC colleagues, and the real focus is on driving that assessment of current position and then starting to bring forward some of the potential avenues and options by early in the autumn, which won't will come very quickly for us. So hopefully I've filled that sufficiently for Carol, who's in a bit more of the detail, to be able to fix her technical.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Carol, yes. Yes.
That's all I've done is unplug my earphone. So anyway, really sorry for that, and thank you, Carol, for stepping in. I can just really quickly go through some of the scoping document itself. Again, the the background does provide a summary of the current reconfiguration of services that we've got. And again, the key findings from the path to safer beginnings recommendations, which is just relevant to the JCC. What it does summarise is what's in scope and what's out of scope. You will see that maternity is out of scope, special care, baby unit and transitional care is out of scope. And I think a discussion I had with Lee, it's really important to recognise at this stage that that there's no requirement for any service user involvement or public consultation at this stage of the work. There are a number of dependencies and risks that are noted within the document, including the relationship, which I think is really important, to the National Programme Board and our Welsh Government colleagues. And I know that Carol is really closely aligned to that piece of work, with the first meeting of that Oversight Board due to meet on the 25th of June. In terms of the deliverables, the group intends to, as I said, provide, and I think Carol summarised this, to provide a historical review analysis, which will be presented back to the JCC in September, following which a decision can be made whether to consider an externally commissioned demand and capacity review thereafter. The intended outcomes and success measures are there summarised at the end of the document, and again, very similar to Sue in her summary with mental health. It does really provide us with an opportunity to reset the work and direction at this stage. I don't know if Lee also has anything to add. And again, the scoping document has been shared with Mandy Rayani, and she's unable to attend today, but again, is supportive of the document that's been presented to you.
Thanks, Carol. I know Gilla wants to come in, but just you quite rightly said, and it's completely appropriate, that maternity services are out of scope. But that's a clear dependency, though, isn't it, in terms of any action we take in relation to neonatal services, is alignment to the configuration of maternity services. So how are you going to reflect that? Carol, how are you going to reflect that?
So some of that work will be presented back because it's, you know, what we do already know is the number of services and deliveries is really dependent on the actual defining of units. I don't know whether Carol's also got a hand up, so I don't know whether she's got something additional to say in terms of that.
Carol, then I'll bring Yellow in.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very keen to understand what other parts of the UK have done on this, because you're absolutely right. It's absolutely key dependency, but however others moved. So, you know, what we don't want to trip into is a really significant conversation that talks about the reconfiguration of maternity services, neonatal services. So what are the different care models and approaches that have been taken across the UK, and how might we consider that in drawing through any options, advice and recommendations for the future? So we've got to address that part alongside, you know, or align it really, not necessarily address it, but to align that as a really critical codependency here. It might not be the complete rate limiting factor to making changes and improvements in neonatal services, but it may be. So that's why I'm very keen that we take a broader look than just what we've done here in Wales to date. Thank you.
Carol, Yellow, then Abby.
Can I ask, you know, I think the perception I've had is that Joint Committee have been keen that these things move with pace. Given that it's really difficult to conceive that there won't be a need for a demand and capacity review, why not go ahead and do that now rather than wait until September to think about doing it?
Carol Bell.
Yeah, I think the reason for that is because we really need to just provide the update to the committee in terms of those recommendations that have been done in the past, and by who as well, Yolo, so that we have got them all in one place in order to be able to provide that information and then gain that support going forward on the evidence that we've got. I can see that Ross has also got his hand up, who again had the conversation with Carol, so I'm going to bring Ross in as well, knowing some of those details.
Well, Ross.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think in terms of demand and capacity modelling, it's really important that we have upfront agreement of the assumptions that we're going to make to put into that, because that, you know, will ultimately inform the model. You know, there's examples of that work that's been done in NHS Scotland. So I think, you know, Carol and I, we had a discussion a couple of weeks ago, Carol, didn't we, in terms of giving the committee sufficient knowledge and information by September in order to inform that, the decision to move to an external demand and capacity review, but alongside that to be very clear on the assumptions that we would need to make in terms of asking for that model to be undertaken.
I think it might be worthwhile just taking that away and just to see whether or not there's an opportunity to look at a twin track approach, acknowledging the paper issue.
That was exactly what I was going to raise, Ian. I think there's an issue here in terms of understanding pragmatism, in terms of gathering the recommendations, letting those influence the principles and assumptions in any demand and capacity review. However, I think we're aware that actually we as the JCC and G2C predecessor most probably found ourselves in the firing line for criticism about what structures hold up decision making in these sorts of things. So I was going to suggest similar. I think, yeah, wait for that recommendations to come through, but in parallel, people could be drawn up to specification, talking to potential suppliers, and get ready to kick in pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's making a huge amount of sense. But Abby, I've not forgotten you. Carol S.
Oh, sorry.
Carol,
yeah, sorry. Yeah, just on this.
So the thinking was, and there's absolutely nothing precluding us, I agree, working up specification. The thinking was the detail of the work that's been done in Scotland is quite significant. What principles of learning could we take from that if we were to apply? And Ross is absolutely right. It's all about the assumptions then, and then get into a detail. What we didn't want to do was to commission that from the off. It take 3-4 months, whatever, and then we've lost some time and some ground, or even that we've expended costs that we might not need to do. So I'm very happy as the Chief Exec lead to support the running alongside of the preparation of a specification, but I think there's quite a lot to gain from learning from the work of the Scottish NHS in particular, but not just Scotland. Beginning of September is about 12 weeks away, so we don't to lose any ground really.
Thanks, Carol. That's really helpful. Abby.
Thank you very much, Ian. A couple of comments, if I may. Firstly, would really support that in terms of the demand and capacity. I noticed I didn't see NHS P&I on the stakeholder, but they might have been on the group somewhere. But certainly, clearly, they've got demand and capacity and modelling capacity that we could potentially draw upon in relation to that. So early conversation, I think, would be very welcome. Two further comments that are from a provider perspective, so apologies for this. Firstly, we have implications from the resident doctor contract. Sorry, I leant on my keyboard. In relation to meeting the resident doctor contract requirements. So there are implications for us in relation to neonatal services. I guess that's something that we may not have considered across other services, that we need to ensure that from a commissioning point of view, there could be cost risks associated with the services commission. So for us, there are resident doctor contract implications to be compliant. The other thing I just wanted to flag is colleagues will be very aware that we had an oversight independent review of our maternity and neonatal services. And one of the issues they flagged is us having our level 3 neonates and maternity on a site that doesn't provide acute or emergency services 24/7. That's kind of been escalated in our conversation with Welsh Government around needing to accelerate our plans to rectify that. That's clearly not a simple thing to do because Morriston is full, but that would be part of a bigger conversation about how we reconfigure services across our sites. But I just wanted to flag that has we've explicitly had feedback from Welsh Government about how quickly we can develop a plan to address that. So clearly that needs to be an important factor. And Carol, I'm happy to share the extract from our escalation board notes or letter to that effect. And then the final thing is, I hear what you're saying about not having any service user involvement. I can't see why we wouldn't want to do that at this stage. It's just really helpful, isn't it? Doesn't necessarily need to be detailed, but just reminding ourselves about the importance from a family service user. And there are various peer groups, and we've got groups of patients, volunteers who are ex-patients. And I would have thought there's a relatively easy way of finding some sort of representative voice from a patient perspective. I think that might be helpful.
Can we hold that, Abby, that last point, I think, because there might be a general conversation be useful to have for all of these service reviews and deep dives in terms of an appropriate level of engagement from service, either current or potential service users, which is, I think, it's important that we capture. Suzanne.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 2 points, and it's about the dependencies or sort of interdependencies. So I think it is tricky to do this piece of work with maternity services out of scope. But I suppose the question might be asked, what is the implication for maternity services of any specification? And that might be the way around that. I think similarly so with the transport. And I just don't really understand what review of transport governance means. I mean, what we'll need for an effective neonatal network is operationally sound, cost effective, suitably capable neonatal transfer services. I'm not sure if that's the governance or not. So that's my only point really, is that in scope specification clear enough around what we'd actually need to know?
Ross, on that point.
Yeah, sorry, Suzanne, perhaps governance is clunky language, but yeah, absolutely in understanding what the established neonatal transport service we would need to establish, how that needs to be run, where the governance, the oversight, the clinical governance for it sits, which, you know, I think historically has been challenging given a 3-site delivery model, and hopefully resolving that issue moving forward.
And I think that the point that Suzanne, you raised in relation to maternity services, I think it's difficult for us as a JCC to say that it's in scope because we're not responsible for maternity services, but that codependency is absolutely vital, isn't it? And making sure that we are capturing that within the minutes of this meeting, but also that there is that shared understanding particularly amongst health board colleagues, but that dependency is going to need to be clearly understood, and a degree of alignment as we work through recommendations is going to be fundamental if we want this to have the impact that we believe it could have. Okay, I think we'll move on if that's okay, unless there's anything else on neonatal. Let's move on to cardiac, and I'm conscious, Mel, we're not starting from a blank sheet of paper here.
No, so this is the cardiac strategic review is focused on ensuring that cardiac surgery and TAVI services across South Wales are safe, sustainable and equitable, but also addressing some of the financial and system pressures that we've got at the moment. As we've reflected, I think, in some of our other conversations today, you know, this work and a lot of the other work is a key part of ensuring that specialised services in general remain fit for the future. So this is phase 2, if you like, of the cardiac review that was initiated following a GIRFT review into cardiac surgery services across South Wales, and reflect significant changes in demand, clinical practice and cost, and then specifically around TAVI and cardiac surgery. So it recognises that the current arrangements no longer fully reflect the population need, service utilisation, and how we could deliver value for the resources that we have invested. So as a result, we've got a clear need to ensure that services are delivering consistent quality, providing timely access for patients, and to remain financially sustainable. So the programme was structured into 2 phases. So phase 1, which is mostly complete, I would say, is rebaselining the contracts to better align to activity and demand, and reviewing the TAVI commissioning policy, including cost variation and some of the patient outcomes. The contracts haven't been fully rebaselined because some of that is dependent on the service configuration. They've been rebaselined to the extent that they can be in the current service configuration. So that leads us then into phase 2, which is currently underway, which will be focused on demand and capacity modelling based on population need, a development then of a future commissioning model with an options appraisal taking us to that point, and then the introduction of the new cardiac surgery specification that's already been issued and developed with clinical input and has been agreed. We are imminently going to write out to providers to do a self-assessment against that specification so we can identify any gaps. So alongside this, we'll be looking to bring in patient experience and outcomes data where that's available, looking at, again, some of the initial feedback we've had have been around how do we get to early stakeholder engagement? Is there a space for some focus groups once some of the options emerge, and making sure that we've got decisions that are evidence-based and clinically robust. So the review specifically focuses on cardiac surgery and TAVI, the commissioning, delivery and future configuration. So out of scope for cardiac review are those wider cardiology services, the capital that would be associated with any changes to configuration of services, and the implementation of any changes before we get to a formal approval. So by the end of the review, we'll bring forward a recommended future commissioning model, a high-level implementation plan, alongside some robust evidence on demand, capacity, outcomes and cost. And we're progressing some short-term specific actions around how can we work to reduce some of the TAVI device costs, and how can we evaluate variation in the device use across providers. There are a number of key system risks around this. We know that there's workforce sustainability issues in the services themselves. We have then capacity and skills constraints within the JCC, and how can we mitigate some of that potentially by using resources from the wider system, and then dependencies on wider system decisions. We know that there's interdependency with thoracic, for example, and that hasn't been implemented due to a lack of capital. So that might give us an opportunity to think about how we could look at those things in parallel when we bring the options forward. In terms of governance, Phil Clure is our Chief Executive lead, and I've met with Phil, but obviously he's not here today. But fortuitously, Rob Holcomb is our CCLG exec rep for this, and Rob is here today. And you know what we've heard both in the boards themselves and from conversations with Phil is, are there potentially some opportunities to go at this a little bit faster by bringing some resources in from outside? So the team are looking at whether there are things that we could shorten the timelines on, if we could pull in some resources either from health boards or commission those externally in order to be able to get to some options more rapidly. I think there are probably some opportunities here on where we are with our programme for government, etc., if we are going to make some decisions on configuration, etc. And there might be some opportunity around that, more widely looking at what the opportunities might be. And I think we would also reflect that Susan Elsmore is the lay member for this, and I've met with Susan as well, but she's not reflected within the paperwork, so apologies for that oversight, and we'll make sure that that is corrected. And that, so I suppose leave it there.
Rob, anything you wish to add at this point?
I think just in terms of some of the debate so far, it's important to have the wider pathway mapped for the entry and exit points to understand how that's fitting in the future model. Mel's mentioned about my preference for doing this faster. I'll leave that there. And then probably the only other thing would be around making sure that we've got the right sort of capacity established on the wider population needs of the future, which is part of the plan anyway. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Really helpful. Susan, anything you wish to add?
Just to, I think, sort of echo perhaps some of the earlier conversations in relation to health. So to ensure that we have perhaps best value conversations, but also thinking about stakeholder and patient engagement. But you touched on that, Ian, in a broader sense.
Yeah. Thanks, Susan. Any other points anyone wishes to flag in relation to the cardiac review? Abby.
Yeah, just this issue about interface with other stakeholders. So I'm aware that in Isabel Oliver's team and linked to the National Clinical Services Plan, Richard Evans is now working on and contributing to discussion about tertiary services. So I do wonder about, I'm not sure about the status of stakeholders and what we actually mean, but there's probably something about making sure they're a group that we just need to keep informed. They may not be a core stakeholder in terms of being involved in the work, but we probably need to, on that matrix, those who we need to keep informed, and that might be a good one in terms of link across there.
George, anything you wish to?
Just to say, I've met with Richard because obviously the development of the National Clinical Plan ties very neatly into the development of our longer-term commissioning strategy. So we are making those links. But yeah, I completely agree, Abby, that more formal link is pretty critical.
I mean, a lot of this is going to be dependent upon clarity around the overall National Clinical Plan, isn't it? And so making sure there is that clarity in terms of alignment is going to be really important. So I'm pleased you've had those meetings, but maybe we need to capture that as being another codependency for the whole of the review programme. Susan.
Sorry, something I forgot, but it was prompted by something that Carol said in relation to the first review, which is about learning from elsewhere. Very important.
Okay, great. Any other comments? And again, a lot of the issues here we've rehearsed as a JCC before, in terms of the approach that was needed in terms of understanding not only patient pathways, but also the elements that the JCC commission, how that is best commissioned and where, but acknowledging that the existing patient pathways, how they feed into that is going to be really important. Okay, let's move on to ambulance and 111, Ross.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the focus of this review really is on developing a commissioning for value framework for ambulance services in Wales, and particularly the development of specific service specifications and performance management frameworks for the services provided by the Welsh Air Ambulance the Welsh Ambulance Service on behalf of the JCC. I think it's important to reflect that during the lifetime of the JCC, the nature of how services are delivered and performance managed within the ambulance service has changed substantially. With the recent changes last year in response to the ambulance performance framework, and therefore I think there's a real opportunity for the development of our commissioning approach now to catch up. I think it's fair that individual members of the committee and the committee more broadly have challenged me in particular on the nature and breadth of our relationship with the provider and the opportunities to shape that moving forward, and that's what this strategic review aims to set out. So in scope is the service specifications and the performance management of EMS, NHS 111 Wales and NEPS, to review and redesign that commissioning relationship between the committee and the provider, establish baseline performance data across the 4 commissioning domains that have been outlined in the paper, and to support recommendations on how funding decisions can connect to the performance evidence going forward. It isn't intended to recommend what the internal operational management or clinical model should look like within the service itself. So I've set out the deliverables, Chair, over Q1 and Q2, and I suppose just to recognise that this will be building on some of the work we already started last year in response to the productivity review work. And I know, colleagues, we've had a discussion earlier on in the meeting around the service specification of non-emergency patient transport in particular, but I think it's really important to reflect on the role and function of particularly the EMS service and NHS 111 Wales within the broader urgent emergency care system, and the committee's appetite for what that should and could look like. So Nicola Progoris is kindly supporting, for she's not here today, and Claire Thompson will be the CCLG lead.
Thanks, and I'm the link layman.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Chair.
Don't worry, that's fine. I've been consulted on the scope and content with the approach, and particularly what's in the scope and what's not in scope. And I think it's really important that we have that shared understanding. Emma.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I really welcome the intent behind the scoping review and the efforts that have been invested so far. I was a little concerned that actually West hasn't been engaged in the drafting of this scope. And I think also some of the current stakeholders that have been set don't fully reflect, I think, those that need to be involved. I mean, every health board really wants to be involved, I would have thought, or certainly has a vested interest in our performance and how it connects in terms of alternative pathways and the connectivity of the system. As I described, West is not an island, and so I think a broader stakeholders would be welcome if we definitely want to be able to deliver the outcomes sought. They're not going to be solely dependent on WAS. So I think without that breadth of that engagement, there's a risk that the review won't land in a way that supports implementation or system ownership. I'm a little bit concerned about the timeline. We've been talking for a while about getting data from the service review initially in January. We're now May, so I really would ask the committee if I could just go back and work with Ross a little bit on the timelines and maybe have an input into the drafting. And I think there are some dependencies. The community by design work with the urgent and emergency pillar is definitely a dependency that's not listed here. And I also think possibly for all of these reviews, there's a dependency around the new NHS Wales P&I accountability framework and performance management agenda. because I think some of us aren't necessarily quite yet clear around where one starts and the other stops. But I would definitely welcome the intent of it, but would request a little bit of time to work with Ross and give a bit more feedback.
Thanks, Emma. Rob.
Yeah, thanks. Just reading the template, I'm surprised resources and clinical model are excluded from the review, especially if there's an aim to improve productivity as stated and value. I'm not sure you can do that. You're just looking at one side of the equation. But I'll play that back to Nicola, and perhaps people can have a think about that.
I think Nicola's been consulted on these, but again, that's useful for you to feed that back directly to her, I think. Lee?
Yeah, thanks. I obviously within WAS we have the ambulance, the emergency ambulance service and NEPS. But I just wondered, would the review reflect on whether there are any gaps between those services that we might need to think about? So I'm particularly thinking around we're increasingly needing to transfer patients between hospital sites, not emergencies, but also not NEPs, but really. So what is the service provision for that, or what could it be going forward? So just a question on whether that is going to be considered within the scope of the work. Thanks.
Ross?
Yeah, thanks. So Emma, apologies. I think as Hayley said earlier, we're working at pace with this, so I appreciate that I haven't had the opportunity to engage with you in the organisation as much as I would have liked. Rob, I think in terms of when we talked about the resources, we've particularly specified that sort of in-year renegotiations, but clearly there's a fallout in terms of any decisions the JC make around the service specification to be delivered moving forward into future years. So I think that will come out through that, but happy for Nicola and myself to pick that up outside of the meeting. And Lee, I think, I think what's become apparent over quite a number of years in there is as health board service models have changed substantially, there's been an emerging gap in service provision, particularly for that sort of subacute type interfacility type move that we haven't really needed historically, but it clearly is a large and growing part of the work now. So I think in defining those service specifications across those, I think the interfaces across each one will be really important. And clearly, for that example, there's clearly an interface across EMS and NEPS, but there'll be similar discussions around the interface for urgent and emergency care through the 111 and the EMS and the NEPS system.
Emma?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, hopefully we can cover in the dependencies bit, the bit about how the health boards and how they manage, their urgent emergency care does impact on us, whether they've got SPOAs, SDECs, alternative pathways, etc. So it'd be good to make sure that's in. The productivity agenda sort of keeps popping up, and the JCC will be aware the greatest productivity that we can get for our patients in terms of meeting unmet demand and reducing community risk is handover 45, which is not within our gift. If we look at how much productivity we can gain from roster reviews, sorting out meal breaks, attendance, it's like 1,000 hours out of 16,000. So I think we just need to be really mindful about some of the narrative around this push around productivity, because I'm not pushing, and thank you, Suzanne, for shaking your head and agreeing, I'm not pushing saying I expect back, but there's quite a lot of push around the productivity gains that I can make, which are absolutely minuscule to the system ones that we can gain if we work better together. And I think that's the key for me about this scoping review, is really making sure that we are working together, which is why I made one of the comments about the stakeholders not having any of the health boards in. Doesn't feel like it's got enough engagement around actually we are so interconnected with one another in terms of our performance outputs. And I just want to sort of note that, because I kind of am beginning to sense this real pressure for us to make productivity gains that will have very little impact than the bigger ones we can make if we work collaboratively together as a system. And I really would welcome JCC helping with that, aligned to the community by design work.
Thanks, Emma. Just want to come back in terms of the comments made earlier around scope and Hugh, in terms of, it's a fine balance, isn't it? Making sure that we absolutely need providers involved, but that also then the challenge, I don't think we've done this with the other providers, of the providers inputting into the scope of the reviews that we're undertaking. And I guess it's about more engagement and consultation, perhaps, rather than contributing to the scope.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a difficult one, isn't it? When we're sort of collaboratively commissioning and trying to do commissioning in a different way, there's something about at some stage we do need the arm's length nature from the providers in terms of the commissioners around the table agreeing the scope. But what is important is actually the conversations that then take place. And I think in terms of the engagement going forward, this can't be seen as out with the provider. But again, it's that difficulty in terms of maintaining that distance. And I think Emma's points are very important here. But what's quite clear in the document is the engagement plan was one of the deliverables from the first quarter. And it will be those sorts of conversations which will determine the engagement plan and who's going to be involved.
Okay, thanks. Any other points anyone wishes to raise? Ross, anything finally you want to say?
No, thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much. Can we move on then to the... Go on, Nia, sorry, apologies.
I just want to say, I've put it in the chat, but I'm aware that you can't see the chat. I just think that Emma's points about the relative sizes of gains of doing things alone versus doing things together is something that we need to bear in mind throughout.
Thanks. And Suzanne?
No, it's my point really. I think the proportionality of what levers are in our gift as a commissioner, it just needs to be in the right balance. And I do wonder what the JCC's opportunity is with the other health board providers. I don't know what that looks like. You're not commissioning ambulance services from us, but clearly there is a gain there, which is far outweighs some of what's being described. Because I know there's other work underway, and that's the complexity in the system, isn't it? But I think just have to be clear about that.
I think that's why I flagged that under the Chief Commissioner's report earlier, in terms of ambulance handover days was still the most significant issue and impact. And what do we need to do differently, I guess, is the question collectively. So that of course, will be linked to this, but it has a more fundamental impact in terms of the nature of relationships, and making sure that we do that together is going to be absolutely crucial to making sure we can make the biggest possible impact to our patients and to the citizens of Wales. So I think it's a point well made again. Okay, I think let's move on to the deep dives. Perhaps we don't spend as long on the deep dives as we've done on the service reviews, but George, you happy for me to go to renal?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Mel, you again.
Okay, so as you'll be aware, obviously the Welsh Kidney Network, the governance of it has changed over the last year following the review of its governance on the establishment of the JCC. So part of the rationale for this deep dive is to kind of focus on, how do we get that understanding of kidney services in Wales. Previously the WKN's operated slightly at arm's length, with its own ring-fenced budget. So this is about making sure that there's transparency around arrangements and how we can make sure that what we're doing is delivering effective services. So the review will be looking around what can we do about service efficiency? Can we demonstrate that we've got value delivered by the existing contracts, including the independent providers? So and obviously recognising the fact that particularly dialysis driven by things like lifestyle factors, etc. So we've got a growing demand for this that we're not going to be able to turn in the short term. So the aim of this would be to provide a clear evidence-based understanding of the current system, showing where the resources are being used, what outcomes are being achieved, and where there are potential risks and inefficiencies, and then identify opportunities for us to improve value and reduce risk and inform future commissioning decisions for specialised kidney services, and any opportunities then that we've got around in-year opportunities to mitigate the cost pressures that we've got across renal. So the deep dive will be focused on key high cost and high impact areas, including kidney transplant, unit-based dialysis, home dialysis, vascular access. It includes services delivered in both Wales and England, but it doesn't include prevention and wider nephrology services, the broader care closer to home programmes and unrelated services within Welsh blood services. So we'll bring forward a comprehensive assessment of the current spend, including contracts and commissioning commitments, patient flows and activity patterns, care pathways and interdependencies, and quality outcomes across the services. So making sure that we are utilising our resources, improving service sustainability and informing evidence-based decision making. We've got some obviously risks around it. We need to make sure we've got strong provider engagement and support. There's quite a network of providers across this, and there's stability of services going forward, and then ongoing funding pressures affecting the sustainability of services. Because we've already got some kidney network structures in place, this will come forward quite quickly. So we're aiming to use the current kidney network structures and bring initial findings to the kidney network in July, in order to be able to bring it forward into in alignment with the JCC's governance structures. So Paul is our lay member for the Welsh Kidney Network, and he's been engaged now for some months in the work. And Suzanne is our nominated chief executive for this piece of work. I don't think we've got a CCRG exec lead at this point in time. But yeah, I suppose if Paul or Suzanne wanted to add anything.
Suzanne, anything you wish to add?
No, not really. I think Mel's covered it. I mean, this isn't territory I'm hugely familiar with, so it's quite helpful from that point of view to get under the detail. But it clearly needs to be a piece of work that is driving out opportunity from the existing arrangements and understanding, you know, what that scale of opportunity is, and then where can we get to it. That's my sort of sense of it thus far.
Thanks, Paul.
Very much the same, to be quite honest. I've got another catch up on Friday with Mel and other people from the network as well. There are sort of key areas of performance like home dialysis, but it is very much fleshing out the areas where we can focus some attention on in increasing effectiveness and changing the shape of the service as well. It's a tight time scale for, you know, what could be potentially quite a big piece of work, but necessary. And I'm very happy to be engaged in it.
All of them are tight time scales, but that's important that we are giving that rigor and focus to this in terms of the plan for this year. But thanks, Paul. Any other comments? I think we note that then, and then moving on into IPFR, Yola.
Thank you.
Deep dive.
So Abby is the lead chief exec. We're meeting with her later. You're the lay member, and we've met with you. I think the major issue would be to distinguish between, there's a lot of things in the IPFR budget which are really business as usual. And it's dividing out those things that perhaps should be more business as usual. You know, I think there's well over £10 million spent on intestinal failure and HPN, which is included in the IPFR, but which will hopefully go to being business as usual. There's probably hypertension. There's a number of other conditions. There's also a number of relatively small but high cost. So stem cell transplant for inherited metabolic conditions, which usually in children go to Newcastle, and they're all now at about £250,000, and that is business as usual in many ways, but it still comes with the IPFR budget. So it's separating out what a true IPFR, what's business as usual, but also the other thing we need to look at is the run through of decisions to fund a medication perhaps that is life-changing for the patient, but then that carries on longer term and the implications of that. We're not looking at the process of the IPFR consideration itself. Members will remember that there was an external review of the IPFR process in JCC, which was very complimentary. So it's just looking at the finances more than anything else.
Abby, anything you wish to add?
If I may, Chair, I think Yola's right in terms of distinguishing between those two areas where we allocate funding. The question about outcome and benefit is really important here in terms of value. I know there are really clear criteria, but this is a budget that's been running over year on year. And Yolo, correct me if I'm right, the risk is that one of the issues we'll need to be facing is how do you set a realistic budget, recognising that referrals potentially are going up in terms of the opportunity that's presented by a whole range of services that our patients could benefit from. So I think it's more than we need to make sure in the scope we are describing that. How do we, amongst all our other priorities, ensure that we have a budget that's set properly and proportionately and doesn't run over because the process approves more activity and patient care than actually we've got in the budget and can afford. So there's that context we need to put to that, and that will be really challenging, but we'll need to come back with recommendations about how we do that.
Thanks. And as Yolo mentioned, I'm the lay member, and I agree with Abby's observation, but also in relation to making sure that we focus on the things that need fixing rather than things that don't need fixing process. Any other points, Suzanne?
Another point I was going to make is I think there's something around culture in relation to this activity. So what happens in reality is that clinicians who want to access specific kinds of care for their patient, where we don't have commissioning established, use this mechanism. So which leads to, as Abby describes, an untapped and unforecast cost, but actually drives strategic direction without strategy having been made, because they want to get the care for their patients. So I think the sort of subspecialty analysis of what actually sits in here would be really helpful commissioning insight for this committee. What specialist services are being commissioned this way, therapies, or what access is being achieved for patients, in what quantum, sort of thematically. What does that tell us about our existing commissioning approach and scope?
Yolo?
I take your point completely, Suzanne, but I think some of the things that come through IPFR are the reflection of the lack of strategic prioritisation within WISC, now JCC. And so there are therapies that the rest of the UK use where the evidence base is really overwhelming, but they have not been prioritised in Wales.
That's right.
Now, and I think it's worth it remembering that all the health boards are represented at that IPFR meeting, and it's difficult if they make a judgment based on really overwhelming clinical evidence. Are we going to say that that's actually going to be not funded in future? And I take Abby's point about.
But that's exactly the point, isn't it, Yolo? Is understanding the gap between what's actually happening in practice and what the decisions are we're making here. Because I think if we could see a big spend in a particular area that is absolutely driven by best practice, what clinicians and patients need and should have access to, that should be really informative to this committee in terms of some of these prioritisation. Because what happens is we make decisions in this space, often financially driven, if I'm honest, which actually don't then manifest in the reality for patients and drive a cost in a different place without a strategic intent. That's exactly my point.
That could and then should then influence a commissioning decision rather than having the phone go to IPFR.
In a controlled way instead of a completely uncontrolled way. Just not criticising the clinicians or the teams involved, but we've said no, and then they're saying yes another way.
Nia?
Oh yeah, I maybe got the wrong end of the stick, but and also notwithstanding what you said, over and above that, isn't there a sort of opportunity? That's not the right word, but doesn't it cost more sometimes to go through IPFR anyway because it sidesteps the blue tech thing? Or have I got that wrong? I mean, and that seems like a massive problem. Then if we're funneling people to go through a gap that doesn't even take blue tech into account, well, it's just someone's got to pay for it, haven't they? And hope that patients get the service for it.
On your end.
So that's a point very well made. And I think, that comes back to the prior approvals. So we would like to move all of the prior approvals that should be routine commissioning, which come to IPFR to Blue Tech. So, for example, the HPM, the parental nutrition delivered at home, we hopefully in the next month or two will change that from a huge prior approval form to a Blue Tech, which will give automatic sign off for those medicines. And so we would hopefully streamline and make it easier for clinicians.
And the point I think that Suzanne and Nia have made is proactive commissioning should be better value for money than a standalone IPFR process.
Agree entirely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that some of this is the manifestation of how commissioning decisions were made in the past, because I do think that within WISC as the predecessor organisation, IPFR was used as a bit of coverall for very low patient number commissioning. So some of these are deliberate in that where things were low numbers, and there's high volatility then when you've got very low numbers, is actually IPFR was a better way of controlling the low number, high spend, or prior approval was a better way of controlling those low number, high spend, kind of making sure that we've got grip and control of that, than actually putting some commissioning arrangement in place that we didn't really understand some of the demand for some of the novel treatments. So I think this deep dive is an absolute real opportunity to get into that space that both Suzanne and Yola have described.
Look, really good discussion. Actually, so I think there's an opportunity here in terms of whatever comes out of this deep dive in terms of looking at, is there a more cost-effective and greater productivity with actual strategic commissioning of a service rather than it being funneled through an IPFR process. And as Suzanne said, in a more planned, structured way.
Agreements.
Okay, really helpful, unless there's no more comments. So, conscious of time, let's move on to thrombectomy. That is Ross.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So similar to the other ones, I guess the aim here is to provide a detailed level of understanding of our current thrombectomy commissioning in Wales, particularly understanding where current activity sits, reviewing and summarising the previous decision making and the phasing of implementation of those, and also addressing the quality and timeliness of the data provision that we receive. I think what I'd reflected, this one is a really important one in terms of our discussion we had earlier about the Aarhus pathway impact. So whilst thrombectomy will be the pinnacle of care for these individuals, the outcome and their likelihood and propensity to receive thrombectomy will be much earlier in the pathways, from the point of the identification of their stroke and then the contacting of the 909 system. So we're aiming to give that sort of overarching pathway analysis of the route to thrombectomy, notwithstanding where out of scope is the sort of current configuration of stroke services, although we are in contact with colleagues in NHS PNI in relation to the work they're doing on stroke regionalisation and the establishment of the acute stroke service for Wales. So Paul Mears as the lead chief executive, and George, I still think we're just trying to work out, finalise a CCLG rep.
And Paul Worthington's a lay member, I think.
Yes, sorry.
Paul, anything you wish to add?
No, it's a good summary from Ross. I think, as he says, rightly so as well. There's two things. One, need a quick understanding of where we've got to in terms of what's gone before. The relationship with those stroke services are outside it. I think the relationship to stroke services is absolutely key. That intertwining is critical to sort of outcomes. But I think a first understanding of where we are now, what where we should be, is an important starting point.
Thanks. I know we've had a number of conversations around the JCC table around thrombectomy over the last couple of months, and again a potential of a bit of historical knee-jerk commissioning rather than thinking through patient pathways in the way that would actually be most beneficial for patients. I know, Suzanne, it's something you've raised on a number of times with us.
Yeah, no, I just want to know if it's all right to come in, Chair, just checking.
Yeah.
And I think this is what you're saying, Ross. I mean, I think as currently the commissioning of the existing services, the degree to which the provider are achieving that, and then there is, again, it's around the pathway piece, the interdependency. So my point has always been, when we've been in this forum, is that you're spending a lot of money, the JCC, on commissioning a thrombectomy service, but I get so few patients as the provider in the window of opportunity, you're wasting your money. So if that's in, because it's not just that, because it will be the linkages to established stroke services or the identification of patients in other bits of the system, whether that's them reporting and ringing 999 themselves or shipping up at another emergency unit and then being identified and moved to a place where they would benefit from a thrombectomy. And I think we've got to be really clear how we understand what we're looking for here, so that we can, I think we've got all the pieces of the puzzle, but we haven't joined them up sufficiently well to actually get the patient benefit that we were seeking with the expenditure. If that's the intent of what it describes in the scope, which I think again is a little bit vague, then good.
Yeah, I think so. So I think what I'm hyper cautious of is that what we shouldn't put forward is commissioning decisions based on the current activity that goes to thrombectomy centres. The activity that goes to thrombectomy centres currently is the activity that the system is able to get there. That is not the totality of the population who should have access to thrombectomy centres. Now that may, I guess, lead to questions about how do you phase in, when do you expand, where do you expand? But what this was aiming to do really is to give that baseline level of understanding in order to inform or better inform the decisions we make next.
Okay, any other points so wishes to raise? We then move on to the final area in terms of deep dive, in terms of pathway and referral management. Gwen, I believe you're going to briefly talk us through this. You're muted, Gwen.
Yeah, sorry, I had trouble getting off of mute. Yeah, this piece of work or this programme leads on from some work we've been doing around the additional activity that occurred potentially around the cross-border flows initially, but has actually led to a sort of more broader piece of work looking at the development of a potential for referral management pathway, care pathways, looking to sort of bring that together with the value-based initiatives and to enable us to sort of inform from future commissioning. Clearly, you know, this is a huge piece of work, and the initial parts have been around looking at bringing together some of the data and information sources, and obviously that is one of the biggest dependencies, is actually getting that data from DCHW and NHS England, and also in terms of making sure that, you know, we keep this within the scope and that we don't go beyond that. In terms of where we are at the moment, I know there have been some papers that have been, or reports taken to Finance Performance Committee, and I didn't know if, Paul, you wanted to make any comment about that, the discussions that happened there. I wasn't present at that meeting, but...
Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Gwen. Yeah, PPF has received some papers. I think above all else, this is a really critical part of what we're doing. One of the key risks we've got is in relation to management of activity, and I know historically we've done some work on management and capping, but in terms of understanding and being able to manage the flow of referrals, this is a really important piece of work. And yeah, we're keeping an eye on in PPF as well.
Hayley, is there anything you wish to add? Hayley?
Thank you. Not particularly today. I think that from my point of view, I haven't been able to get to the task and finish meetings, but I know that this priority is absolutely critical in terms of demand management, and I'm more than happy to pick up a more detailed update at the next meeting, if that's okay. Thanks.
Absolutely. And Nia, in terms of you being the layperson?
Yes, I've had I've got a conversation with Stacey about this, but I would like to be more involved, in fact, in this, which is good, which would be good, I think. Also, I was looking at the documents, and I think somebody else mentioned NHS performance and improvement earlier as a potential stakeholder, and they're not, I think, on here. But when you were talking, if you isn't this something that they would be interested in? And if not, maybe that explains something. Because it seems to me, having the conversation with Stacey, that actually referral, it's very hard to keep in scope, isn't it, really? Because referrals management is a ubiquitous problem for people, I think. But we're only trying to solve it for us here, but hopefully something will come of it.
And I think, if my understanding, in the letter we've had around our planning from Jacqueline, that cross-border, greater assurance around what we're doing around cross-border activity is a key issue there.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of products that is commonly referred to over the last couple of months is, whether it's single point of referral, whatever, is what is the mechanism we have for actually scrutinising, controlling, or managing those referrals. At the moment, I think this work is got an awful lot of very, very helpful data now and analysis, but actually, how do we turn that into action? I think is the critical next stage.
Paul?
Hugh's just said more or less what I was thinking. I mean, the straightforward logistics of how this happens is absolutely key. There's an issue about sort of getting clinical buy-in and those sorts of things, but in terms of transferring from paper to what happens, the A to B of it, I think, is absolutely critical.
Okay, Nia?
Well, and it isn't just, I think it wouldn't just benefit the JCC. I think any learnings would have application more widely, surely.
Yeah. Okay, we've gone through a lot of information. George, anything you wish to say in summary before we go on to think about patient public engagement?
That was part of my summary, if I may. Thank you. So, so I think if I can just run through what I've heard, and hopefully if anybody disagrees or thinks I've missed anything you'd say. But I think first and foremost, we've been working at pace to get these scopes out for committee today. So huge thanks to the chief execs who have worked with JCC directors on that, and the comments today have been really helpful to make sure that everybody's cited, and also the buy-in for what we're saying are the deliverables, and keeping it really clear about the achievability of those deliverables, because this is what we said we're going to deliver in year. The point about a value and outcomes focus is very well made and clearly recognised. It is up front and centre. It probably ought to be more explicit. The comment around programme architecture and assurance, I'm hoping that comes over time. We've obviously got a plan for how we report this on a very regular basis. We've agreed. Colleagues will remember we've said that at every single joint committee meeting we'll receive an update on these areas of work with the products being programmed into the relevant meetings to receive. The points about learning from elsewhere and cross-border links is really well made. Stakeholders, we obviously need to include P&I in that, and obviously work through the other issues around what each of our roles are in relation to engagement with health boards. Parallel pieces of work, such as the demand and capacity specifications, we will make sure that is undertaken, but not to distract or impact on the pace of work that we are doing. And that patient voice piece, I think that's going to be really critical. So we need to think about how that's built into particularly the strategic review pieces of work, and at what point do we want to include them more formally? Is it, I think Mal, you suggested, as options emerge, could that be the point? So again, we could probably link in Carol from the patient experience, but also Slice, we'd welcome views from you, Angela, on how we can build in that. And the really interesting discussion around IPFR and how we can take the outcome of this deep dive into informing a more strategic commissioning intent is actually something that we should be saying for every single one of these pieces of work. So at the very outset, I said that the whole point of these is that we will take the learning, we will take the outcomes, build it into that critical commissioning decision making that goes into the IMGP for next year. So it all should lead into that strategic intent. But it was a point really well made in the IPFR example. Thank you, Jan.
Julia, it's probably unfair, but any reflections you want to give in terms of having heard all of that now, in terms of obviously the clarity around, well, any sort of initial thoughts you've got?
I think it's impressive how quickly some of these things came together. When I heard that you'd had the wait time and work through it, I was thinking to do all of those reviews in 1 year. I know the imperative is there, but it's a huge ask, isn't it? And this is only the start. So I think it's really encouraging to see what we have got here. I think the trick now is going to be then turning that into the start of the action. I think we need to be really clear about how we measure success. And up front, maybe ask each of the groups what are the measures we're going to be tracking through here.
Thanks very much for that. So, flying on you, but I just thought it would be useful to get your sort of initial reflections with a fresh pair of eyes.
It's great. I think what we're seeing is the different expertise that the different members of the JCC bring absolutely in practice here. So it's great to see.
So I think we're endorsing the scope. Obviously, there's the ability to refine and reflect them, but in terms of the direction of travel, we're endorsing the scopes as been presented to us. I think it's then really important that we then are reporting back to the July meeting, and then there will be a more formal review with perhaps some interim recommendations at the September meeting. So they're going to be sort of the key milestones. George, can you pass our thanks on to everybody who's been involved, because of, as Juliet said, a huge amount of work taking place over a relatively short period of time, with a good level of engagement with lay members and with chief executives to get us to a place where we actually have some clarity in terms of what we need to do, not necessarily what the solutions are, but what we need to do. So thank you very much for that. Great, thank you for that conversation. Two other items I think we'll plough through and attempt to be finished by 1:30. Back to you, Ross, in terms of clinical support hubs and NHS 111 digital front end. Again,
yeah, thanks.
The paper's been read.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and hopefully Chief Executive colleagues are relatively familiar, particularly with the clinical support hub discussion. So this paper sets out to seek the committee's approval for the transfer of the current nationally top slice funding for regional clinical support hubs, £2.98 million. Historically has been provided from NHS PNI 6 Goals programme into, I think, Abbey, Swansea Bay, and then out to the other health boards in terms of delivery of the regional clinical support hubs. Chief Executive members received a letter from the Deputy Chief Executive of NHS Wales seeking their view on 3 options that were set out. And through discussions at CMT and Leadership Board, we've proposed that that funding and commissioning responsibility for the clinical support hubs is transferred to the JCC in the interim. That should take place during Q3 of this year, and alongside that, the JCC will undertake a piece of work to develop a commissioning specification and future plans for the delivery of the functions delivered by the regional clinical support hubs. It was felt, Chair, to maintain that status quo in the interim, given that those hubs do undertake quite a significant level of activity, particularly over the winter months, and therefore need for a very clear plan if we transition to a different model. So the first part of this paper seeks the formal approval of the transfer of that funding and commissioning responsibility. And then the second part, Chair, in relation to the 111 digital, just highlights to members that alongside that, there has also been a transfer of the historical funding available for digital development of the NHS 111 Wales service of £1.243 million recurrently to the JCC in order for the JCC to support the development of the online infrastructure of 111 Wales. We had access to some of that money non-recurrently last year, and we were able to pilot a number of innovations, including the AI digital assistant, WhatsApp integration, and text-only and multilingual access. But clearly this provides an opportunity now for the JCC to take a more strategic approach to supporting the enhancement of the digital front end of 111 as a means of access and hopefully reduction of demand through the telephony system and overall improvement of the experience of people accessing NHS 111 Wales.
Thanks, Ross. Any comments for anybody? Abby?
Yeah, thank you. In relation to the clinical hubs, I think it's the right thing to do to bring it into the JCC at this point and undertake a thorough review. I think it's really important that we're not too closed in terms of what the options should be going forward, because I think as Emma described, I think we've got lots of players on the pitch. I think we've got lots of teams, lots of layers, lots of services that overlap. And I wouldn't want us to be fixed that we absolutely need to keep clinical hubs as they're currently configured. It might be that we want the funding to come in and augment what we've got locally, or in our in the development of our community divide design pillar. I can't remember which pillar it is, but the one that's about emergency and urgent care. So as long as it's in that, on that basis, as opposed to we just want to get the clinical hubs better described, I think we've got to really do a drains up on what do we need to make sure we've got the alternatives to admission. We are clinical conversation book before convey, and that we are using this an opportunity to think about all of the resources that we've got, because I think that's the only way we're going to get the system working. And I think there are too many handovers at the minute with patients getting passed through various gateways, and we don't really have a single point of access. We've got multiple single points of access, i.e. not single point of access, and we need to really streamline how patients get directed to the most appropriate service for their need.
Ross?
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Abby, and sorry for this clumsy language. I guess my only note of caution is that the planning of that transition to a different future, recognising that there is substantial amounts of activity flowing through this, and what I wouldn't want to do is, through us changing in a, I guess, an unplanned way, creating further delays to patients. So no, absolutely. We have put a hold in the diary for a development workshop on that. I've had nominations from a number of health boards, but I will come back to you all in terms of who's been nominated from individual health boards to join that, if you want to check.
Suzanne?
Can I just check, Abby, was this discussed then at NHS Leadership Board on Tuesday, and that was the view you all came to? Because actually my feedback was we wanted the money returned to the health boards. So
no, Suzanne, yeah, I think we'd all kind of indicated that as a direction of travel, but I think the view was a pragmatic one in the first instance, to because we've got people operating and delivering this service, that it should come through in the way that Ross has described. But I think, as you say, Ross, it's not quite described. Yeah, and I think that's why it's important that we understand how we get to where we need to be.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, Suzanne, I think that's important, because the conversation at Leadership Board last week was, this is very much, I suppose, an interim measure. Let's get the funding out, or it's your funding originally in health boards. Let's get it out of P&I. Let's get it into JCC. What we are aware of is that we don't know what the data tells us. I think there's been various challenges in terms of what is the data, how good is it, and what does it mean. So use this interim period to work together to decide what the future model is. There is no assumption it stays with the JCC, but there was a degree of requirement that we do this at pace now.
Okay, no, that's understood. If that was where you all got to, understand. Fine, thank you.
No.
Apologies, I put my hand up and then I put it down.
Okay, no problem. I think let's make sure we capture that in the minutes today, in terms of that not this is a steady state. There is further work that's needed in terms of where this will eventually sit, and including that within the minutes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Can we approve the recommendations subject to that amendment? Finally, then, we've got 150 pages of corporate governance updates.
So lovely way to end the meeting. So these are all part of our year-end approvals for governance purposes. So standing orders, standing financial instructions, and the guidance on the handling of interest, all very minor sort of administrative updates to these documents. They've been through PPF and QSOC as subcommittees. They've all also been shared. So they're being shared with you for endorsement, because ultimately approval of these documents sits with health board boards. So in conjunction with them being shared with you, they're also being shared with health boards this month to be approved. As set out in the paper, it's just getting these right size for where the JCC is now. I think they're all pushed through at pace when the organisation was set up. So it's just to make them a bit more realistic and to align to what health boards do with paper publication, so that they're shared for endorsement. Once endorsed by the Joint Committee, if you're all happy to do so, they should be approved by health boards and we'll get them updated on our website. So unless there's any objection from the committee, I propose that those documents are endorsed.
So this is a governance lead's joy, isn't it? Of a process of going through committee, our committees, the JCC, and then on to health boards.
Not bureaucratic at all.
Not so bureaucratic. I hopefully that we can take assurance from our committees that these have been properly scrutinised both by QSOC and also by finance planning and performance. But anyone got any particular issues they just want to flag before we seek to approve these, endorse them rather? Now, we're happy to endorse these ready for submission to health boards for approval.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else, Sam?
And then for approval is our annual governance statement or accountability report. Again, this document is it sets out how we comply with our governance requirements throughout the year. It's been to subcommittees. It was shared at CTM's Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee last week with no objections raised. So this is being shared for approval, which will then be passed on to CTM.
And I think I thought it was actually quite an interesting read in terms of just setting out how we have exercised the responsibilities that have been delegated to us by health boards, but also that accountability to Welsh Government as well in terms of the responsibility the accountable officer has for a significant amount of public funding. Are we happy to approve this? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Full plan of business, Aaron.
That's just there for noting, Chair, and we'll update you with some of the topics we discussed today as well.
There's been some changes. Well, we've agreed, haven't we? We want some further updates to capture on the action log and to make sure that's flushed out in terms of the future agendas. So let's make sure that's captured. Any other business?
We've had feedback from Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee and some of our committee effectiveness reviews regarding QSOC and CEO membership there. So it's something we will be flagging at a future meeting, but just to say that Phil Clure is struggling to attend all of our meetings. He's fed into Ian, Susan Ellsmore, but we have two CEO members on PPF to support the governance arrangements at that subcommittee meeting, but it is something we'll have to consider moving forward. We'll provide some additional feedback in the subcommittee effectiveness reviews, but it's just to bear in mind that it's been raised at other forums as well.
So we bring back any recommendations in the light of that to the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take that as an action then from this meeting. Any other business from anybody else? Any reflections on the meeting? It's been quite strange, I've got to say, being a small number of people physically present in the room and so many people on the screen. Hopefully it's not been too disjointed, but obviously there was good reason for moving the majority of meeting onto virtual. But I hope it's not felt strange for you on screen as it has for us in the room. Any other reflections on the meeting? No? Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Susan.
It was productive, Ian. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I think the conversations that have taken place regarding the strategic reviews and the deep dive was very helpful. Hopefully, colleagues found that helpful. I think it provides some real clarity. The key issue is going to be about maintaining that rigor and pace, which is going to be fundamental in terms of getting this moved as quickly as we can.
I think, Ian, how we then tie all of that discussion back to the one we had earlier about the delivery of the 16 million.
Yeah.
And so that rigor that we had about, in July, we need to be looking at that. There's got our heads around that.
Yeah, really important. Next meeting is not on the 28th of July, it's 21st of July. And that will be virtual again. But hopefully everybody will have a good rest of the week and stay cool. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Annoying when you go through